meeting of May 23rd, 2018 to order. It is 5 o'clock on the dot. And if we should please stand and join me in reciting. Oh, I am so sorry. Roll call. Thank you.
Gaffney. Here. Borstein. Absent. Meigs. Here. Scylla. Here. Kelly.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Ask for a approval of the agenda. Has everybody taken an opportunity to review and
I move.
Are you here for an agenda item? A specific?
Second.
oh, wait a minute. Well, let me address that. So, can I have a second on the agenda?
I'll second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries by unanimously. Now is an open time for the public to raise items not on the agenda or for future agenda items. Members of the public may address the board on issues that are within our district's jurisdiction, but we can't hold any discussion on that at this time. Is there any public comment? Okay. Before I go to the standing out, we do have people who are in the audience, and I'd like to ask if they're here for any particular agenda item.
She's on the
No.
For the search,
Okay, and what company are you with?
CPSHR.
Okay. I was told there may be two. Do we know what the other one might be?
I believe it is COugH.
If another person comes, I'm going to ask the audience if somebody comes from COugH, and if that happens, we'll move it up on the agenda, so you don't have to sit through the whole meeting. Okay? If the board would approve that.
Sure.
Can we amend the agenda after approving the agenda?
Yes, you may.
Thanks.
Okay.
Oh, you want to ask him if he's from the hospital?
He's not. Is he from COugH?
I don't know.
Yeah, he's,
Oh, no.
he's the new, he's new, yeah.
Great.
Okay, so we approved the agenda, but we may alter the approval in a little bit. So I'm now going to ask for the report out of the standing committees. Tom, do you want to do finance? We met yesterday.
I'll do finance.
Okay.
Doug and I met yesterday as we reviewed the income financial statements for March. We had a lot of questions on those. Then we talked about the reallocation of the lateral program funds, which we continue to update, and that's on the agenda. And then we looked at the, we spent a lot of time accepting the draft budget, and we're reviewing it at this time, but we also have to provide a rate notice for the adjustment to rates this year. And we reviewed the capital program, and I see we've got a couple of big capital program items on the agenda tonight. And we looked at the legal services, and the costs were down for April, which is always good. And then we reviewed a special memo to the finance committee. Well, it was actually the directions for how we need to approve the rate increases for the next year.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to also do CMSA.
Okay, CMSA. The key things we did at CMSA is we reviewed the proposed budget for the fiscal year, same as here, and that's following the recommendations that we discussed. The rate can go up 3.5%. The total cost to the member agencies can go up 3.5%, and then it's allocated. So our share of that, counting everything, using 3.5%, because our fund went up, so it's about 3.7%. That's our total increase to second revenue. We reviewed talked a little bit about the civil grand jury report and what response we're going to make to it, and the decision there was to kind of wait to see what the members are saying. As the Joint Powers Agency, they follow what the members do. We took a look at the final draft of the JPA, and there was a revised withdrawal section, which we certainly approved. I think we were instrumental in getting that. And also some changes to the indemnity, which our legal counsel wanted on that. And so everybody agreed, and that was approved unanimously by the CMSA. And then one of the other items we did was we had a discussion on the Larkspur representation of the CMSA Board of Directors, and both LAFCO and the grand jury recommended that they not be on the board. And I think the consensus, all of the other members except Ross Nile want them on the board.
No, I don't agree with that.
As expressed at the meeting, he's reporting on the
No,
meeting.
no, I was at the meeting.
Oh,
So I beg your pardon. What we had is, we had the representative from San Rafael say that the official position of San Rafael was that it was none of their business. And that it was really between this board and the city of Larkspur. If I recall, she said, we really don't have a bone in this fight.
So the,
Am I incorrect about that?
well,
That was there too.
she
How
said,
did you see it?
she said that, but she also has said before that she wants them on the board.
Right, but that was before, so at the meeting, the official policy that she stated on the record at that meeting was that it wasn't up to them, but it was up to this board and the city of Larkspur, which I, at that meeting, agreed with.
And that's right.
And
actually.
at that meeting, I agreed with.
we have an agenda item of the JPA that we can talk about.
That's a good point.
Right.
And we shall.
Yeah, good.
But I still contend that the consensus of that board was that nobody particularly wants them off the central government board except us.
That may be, I don't think they stated that on the record, but we can talk about that.
Some of them did.
We'll bring it up on the.
Okay, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. Pam, North Bay Watershed, was there a meeting?
Sorry. Yeah. May 4th, we did a wonderful tour out in the, here's a map, I'll just read here. We did a tour out near Novato, and a lot of it is the Sonoma Baylands Restoration Project. Thousands of acres have been saved, amazing stories. People have sort of ventured a lot of those lands for years in very successful restoration. That includes Skaggs Island, that whole, as you're going down 37. We had Beth, here's the different lands that were saved to report. Beth Hunting was the coordinator of the San Francisco joint venture. Great, articulate, powerful woman. She just really kept at this and has been very successful. So we got on a bus, it was like in school, and stopped at various points throughout these baylands. Then we had a, who joined us? It was one of the park, I think it was a local park ranger, and he gave us all the information on what's happening with the water and the dredging, and it was really fascinating. I did not realize how much work and effort and politics, but the good news is that they worked it out. And I'm talking about public and private. So, and there's a lot of talk, obviously, about what's going to happen to 37. And that was sort of it.
Okay. Thank you. You wanted, Pam, if I remember, you wanted to pull some items from the consent agenda, so before I ask,
Oh,
what would you want to pull, C, D, and F, if I remember correctly?
well, no, not all of those.
Okay.
I was able to talk through it. It's E, 6E.
Pardon me?
6E, but
6E.
I'm not done with reports,
Oh.
reporting out, because I went to Sacramento the last 2 days.
On,
The CSDA.
that would be at the end of the meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, I have the standing
I
committees.
guess I'm confused, I thought we had moved all those reports up
No,
at the beginning.
that's a standing committee we moved to the front, not any, at the end of the agenda, verbal reports by board members and staff.
Okay.
Okay. You want to pull E. Does anybody else want to pull anything else prior? So let me just read this. Matters listed on the consent calendar are considered routine, will be enacted by one motion. The consent calendar may include resolutions, therefore the motion, second, and vote will be also applicable to the resolutions and recorded accordingly. There will be no separate discussions of these items unless requested by a board member or a member of the public prior to the board on the motion to adopt. So would anybody in the public want to pull anything? Seeing none, anybody on the board want to pull anything?
6E.
Okay, E, anything, do you want to pull anything? Let's discuss E before we move forward. Consideration of approving of updating department manager employment contract terms. Okay. Pam?
I just wanted to know if, I was kind of wondering about this, the length of the term for 4 years. Some of my questions did get answered as I talked to Greg about, I don't know what an average is, and maybe Andrea, you could help with this, because then I'm hearing that there's usually not even a term, and is it better to have a long term versus a short term?
It varies.
So I mean, I didn't like it to be on the consent calendar, and so I just thought, do you have any ideas or advice, or what do
It
you
really
think?
varies. I mean, I think that it's probably better to have a termination date rather than none,
Right,
because it gives all of the parties some level of certainty.
right.
But in terms of a number of years, I mean, really the general manager has an ability to terminate these contracts, and so it really is more about just the certainty and expectations of the parties, and I'm not sure it makes that big of a difference if it's, 2 or 4 or whatever.
They're still well employees, right?
Yes.
And so the contract is just,
Financial?
I mean, it's not even certainty, it's just sort of setting out expectations.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so legally, we're not,
You're fine.
we're fine.
It's
Okay.
more of a policy, what you want it.
There are no damages should the contract be terminated or.
Okay, I guess we can amend it too if we want to, right? If we needed to change
Yeah,
the dates.
yes,
Okay.
you could.
All right, thank you, that was it.
And I want to remind the board that D, authorizing the reallocation of lateral replacement, we have the lateral in 3 different categories. The $4,000 grant is for those homes that are near heavy I&I, particularly salt water in the bay. And I think that's 300,000, if I'm correct. It's 100,000 for pavement moratorium, so it's
400 was for
and then it's 300 for standard lateral replacement, $1,500 if you're going to replace your lateral due to, well, if you want to just do it, or if you have to because of $75,000 or more, we're selling at the house. And then $300,000 would be, that would be $300,000. Yeah, and then, so the $100,000 is tapped out. In fact, I was at the San Antonio Town Council meeting last night, and Councilman Coleman mentioned that somebody had called and inquired about that. So the reason the pavement condition index, or I'm sorry, the pavement moratorium, 100,000 is tapped out is because Larkspur is doing a lot of road work, and so is San Antonio, and so we have a lot of grants. So what we're asking to do is to just blow it out and say we have $800,000, we'll track it, but first come, first serve.
Oh, we're going to make it one big pool?
Yeah.
I thought we were moving it from one to the other, but we're going to make it one. I was going to ask
Well,
why we even have a distinction.
Yeah, the
between
way,
pots.
the way this is worded, I think that the intent is that the additional funds that are left at this point, it is de facto kind of first come, first served at that point. And I think staff's view on that, and the reason for the recommendation was that the low level of activity we've seen on the high I&I, we don't expect that to change real rapidly. And the standard grant activity too has been trending pretty steady. And only about 60% of the homes that get triggered, that you might think apply, actually apply for that. So they just haven't seen that much activity. So the idea here would be to just let the remainder of the fiscal year play out, but almost certainly we can use a fair amount of those remaining funds for the PCI grants because there's suddenly so much demand with the spike in the paving programs. And it was just the perfect time at which you did not want to start turning people down because we're finally seeing the upturn in the interest and the awareness of it. So, but again, just to remind the boards, this is only for the remainder of this fiscal year, so it'll play out pretty quick.
Yeah, okay.
And And I just wanted to say on the last, the item that Pam pulled, I think it's fantastic that we're stabilizing the management team when we're going to go through a general manager transition. So thank you for wanting to be with us for 4 years, all three of you.
Agreed. Can I have a motion to approve the consent?
I move to approve the consent calendar A6A through E.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None, and the motion carries. Thank you. Excuse me, sir, can I ask where do you have a particular agenda item you're here for?
No, I'm with Brian Caldwell. I'm here for
Everything.
That's his cover.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on to item number 7. Consideration of adopting the draft fiscal year 17-18 budget and providing direction to issue the fiscal year 2018-19 rate notice. Before we start on this, I want to be clear. The draft budget is just that. We have a month to look at this draft budget. I don't intend, and I didn't plan on us picking it apart tonight.
Why is it here then?
Because we have to have it here legally to have it in advance. It's the budget.
Well, I resent that. I spent so much time going through this.
Good, so that's good that you did. It's not-
Well, I have some questions. I don't think that, this is a public process. I really think we should be able to ask questions.
Hold on, I didn't say you couldn't ask questions. I said, the plan isn't to pick this whole budget apart because the budget's going to be on the agenda next month. This is a draft budget that we have to put out by law, and we have a month for the rest of us to dig through this large budget and ask questions. I'm glad you spent a lot of time. You certainly can ask any question you want.
And Finance Committee, we did go into it a lot, so
Yeah.
certainly is appropriate.
Yeah.
But we have to do this in order to satisfy the requirements to send out the notice.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so with that, can I have a staff report?
Sure, so as you kind of mentioned, so there's really two things that the board's doing procedurally this evening, and they are steps that are clearly required under the rate ordinance and then also under a particular state law. And really what you're doing is you're accepting the draft budget this evening, and that's a very important word. It's, again, you're just accepting, receiving it. That's a step that's required in Ordinance 66. And the other part that's required, and we'll go through this following the staff comments, is we're required to present findings that support any changes or the lack of findings for any changes to the already scheduled rate adjustment, which is the fifth and final of the 5-year schedule of rates that the board approved back in 2013-14. So those are just some kind of procedural requirements, but they are very important ones. What we will get to when we're into discussion is we can go to the 5-year financial forecast and review some of the findings, so the board has a clear understanding if there is any question about what is the basis for continuing to stick with the recommended rate adjustment. Let's see. A couple of quick highlights on the draft budget. As I'm sure most of you have noticed, the format and look is a substantial change in the last 3 or 4 years, and we recognize that it's a kind of abrupt change, but we wanted to take a cut at essentially more of a narrowed down sort of narrative-based budget, and then have that backed up with the core financial schedules. And so you don't quite see as much of the graphs and so forth, and that's basically by design this time. But we'd like to get the board's feedback, and if you see things that you'd like to be brought back in, like any particular pie chart or graph or something you felt was informative, by all means let us know, and we can do that. We have made some changes to the overall structure of the financial schedules, and we'll point those out. I think you'll find them very beneficial. They're clarifying changes in terms of our ability to actually have a financial strategy for the capital program. We're connecting funding sources and projects more directly than we did in the past. It was at a broader level in our past setup. And then procedurally, what will happen after this evening is, Doug, as you mentioned, is we follow the same process we have the last 3 or 4 cycles, where the board, we'd ask you to take the next 2 weeks after this meeting, and use that time to complete your reviews. And Pam, by all means, everything you've already reviewed is not wasted time, because what we want to do is have all that feedback from your individual reviews provided to the finance committee members and staff. We'll then schedule a finance committee meeting at the end of that 2-week period and go through all of those comments, discuss them, and come up with updates to the budget based on the finance committee's and staff's review. And then that'll be communicated back out to the board ahead of the June meeting, so you kind of know what the final budget's going to be looking like. And then at the June meeting is when you'd actually be considering approval of the final budget. So you will have, as you mentioned, really anywhere between now and the next 4 weeks, you know, people, you can always provide comments or questions. But we would ask that you focus on that over the next 2 weeks, same as in prior years, and then we can more efficiently handle the individual feedback. Let's see.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please, go ahead, Pam.
So you and I spent a long time going over this on the phone.
Correct.
So you want me to go over this all over again with the financial committee? We were on the phone.
No. You could do two things. So hopefully we resolve some of your questions, but I know you have a handful of, or a number of
Yeah.
comments. What you would do is simply, you could either, I have notes on those from the review that we did, but you could simply put those into an email as a bullet list, for example, send them to myself and one of the finance committee members, and they'll all be on the record for us to address. So that's how we can make sure that they.
But if she's
When
already
is the
sent them to
financial
you,
committee meet? Do they
She
meet on
doesn't-
Mondays or Tuesdays?
We meet on Mondays typically, we
Well,
met Tuesday
So
this
I
time.
will make an effort to come to that.
Okay,
Yeah, because I'm
absolutely.
off on Mondays.
No,
I don't really
no,
want to write all that all up again.
No.
You can't do that unless you just absorb it.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm just
So
saying
you-
that.
No, wait, I'm sorry, hold on. Can you clarify that?
For the committee member, for the committees, that are standing committees, a third board member isn't supposed to be there unless they're simply observing.
They can't talk.
There's no error.
You can't go as a
Right,
constituent?
because then
No.
there's 3 of you discussing issues related to the board, and that's a quorum, and that's the
I
formal
don't
board
think
meeting.
that's true.
So,
I think you can go as a constituent if you say that.
No, Andrea sent me
we
the
looked
link,
into it.
the legislation on that, it's clear. You can go to other board meetings, like, that's specifically why I asked specifically, could I go to CMSA as a constituent? And I knew that you were going, and the answer was yes, we could, because it wasn't our board. You can't go to our own subcommittee board meeting as a constituent. That violates the whole idea of it being a subcommittee.
Can you send that link?
yeah, I'll confirm.
So I want to clarify that, so you know. But, you know, Pam, you're welcome to bring up anything you want tonight. We're here. It's
or
fresh.
she can give it to staff. And if she's already given it to staff, you have it, right?
Right.
You don't have to do it again.
Yeah, so we'll
Well, I know, but
in one fashion or another, we'll get all of that feedback and get it back to the finance committee.
Pam, why don't you give me give us a flavor of some of your concerns?
So when are we going to do a rate study?
Well, okay, so that's, I was going to just
We need a
make
rate
a
study
couple.
to finalize
Yeah,
this.
let me make
Yeah.
a couple other introductory comments.
Okay.
So this is again, the fiscal year you're going into will start off with the 5th and final of the 5-year schedule of rate adjustments. And in the new fiscal year that is starting, you, just like we did last time, you'll go ahead and the district will go out for a rate study in a timely manner. That will then, the outcome of that will support a Prop 218 process, and then the outcome of that Prop 218 process will support, decisions on the future rate adjustments. And all of that occurs in the new fiscal year 18-19 between, I would say, approximately, say, October of this calendar year through about March or April of calendar year 2019. So that's when all that same activity occurs again to set up for the next rate study.
But we'll have it done before we finalize the budget?
Not this
No,
budget.
this is just
No,
budget.
this
This
budget
This is for
is-
1 year?
Yeah, this budget is.
I think we're confusing the 5-year projections with the budget.
Yeah.
Right.
We're approving a budget for 1 year.
Yeah.
Well, I got
Yeah.
the CMSA 5-year rate
We're not
increase
approving the budget,
here,
so
and it
that's
kind of
right.
made me start wondering
Next
about
week.
that.
Next week,
Yeah.
next month.
Yeah.
And so just as the staff report highlights, and these numbers are obviously included in all of the various schedules, the basic findings that staff is presenting to the board for the basis of going ahead with the originally scheduled and approved rate increase is that the fundamentals haven't changed that much. Our current rate revenue is just starting to spin off about $4 million in extra revenue that we can use for capital, but that still leaves a substantial gap in the overall financial needs for the capital program. And if you look out 3 or 4 years, the district financials are in very good shape, but there's still a very clear need for this last increment of the rate increases, because you're still looking at substantial gaps in the capital funding capacity versus what our recurring revenues provide for us. So that's the essence of the findings that we're presenting for the basis for the going forward with the scheduled rate increase. The last thing is, and this is a very high-level overview, and I'll just refer you to the first or second page of the draft budget. And we recognize, if you had to look at the very highest level summary, this would be it. So just to point out a few highlights to the board. When you look at, I'm going to highlight, I'm going to concentrate on the highlighted rows.
So
The overall
page 4, right?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Yeah, page 4, table number 1. So the revenue picture for the district is no surprises there. The only difference between last year and this year is that we don't have any bond proceeds, and we'll see a slight increase in rate revenue because of the schedule change. So if you set aside those bond proceeds in the prior year, you would see a very stable picture there with about a 5 to 6% uptick in the rate revenue. So that's the takeaway on revenue. Ad valorem tax, which we don't have control over, it's driven by the market trends. You're looking at about a 4% increase in ad valorem tax. So that's really the short version of the revenue picture for the district. No surprises there, all pretty stable trends. When you look at the expenditures picture, the big drivers are the cost contributions to operate the CMSA treatment plant, and then the operations and maintenance and staffing costs for the agency. And if you look at all of those, they're generally pretty steady, but there are scheduled increases in each of those. There are increases in the CMSA operations costs that the board is aware of. They were approved in the new 5-year revenue plan at the CMSA board meeting, I think a month or 2 back. You'll see an increase in debt service, and that's because of the bond issuance that we just completed. And the capital budget, that $33 million figure, is really the vast majority of that is construction in progress this year, which is a very different picture in terms of its certainty, we'll put it that way. So you can see the total expenditures there, and the takeaway is that the district is going to spend about $24.5 million more than it's taking in recurring revenue, and basically that is the capital program, and we are doing that by drawing down reserves, or pardon me, I shouldn't say reserves, account balances that we know we've had set aside, and the remaining funds from the last bond issuance. And that's good news in the sense that we got that bond issuance expecting to need the money, and within about the first quarter, maybe the second quarter at the most of the new fiscal year, all of the monies from the bond issuance we just completed will actually be expended at that point because of the rate of activity on the capital program with everything in construction. That's really about it. The other highlights maybe are that our targeted fund balances, we're going to meet our emergency reserve, we're going to meet our operations and maintenance reserve. We will not be able to start contributing to our long-term capital reserve, which is not a surprise because we're still functioning in a basic deficit right there. And just minor changes in OPEB at this point, and we've covered that topic pretty extensively in the last 6 or 8 months with the grand jury reports. So really nothing has changed there that the board isn't already up to date on. And you are looking at finishing up the fiscal year with a reasonable amount of cash in the bank, the $21 million, and 2 of our 3 reserve targets met. And no new debt issuances scheduled in this new fiscal year. So those are just some of the highlights, and we can go into details as useful in the schedules, and with that, I'll hand it back to the board.
Pam, so again.
I have a question on line 15 on 4. there's 14 million for the revised from last year, but then moving over, it's blank.
Yeah, so Pam, that was one of your questions, I remember, I have a note right here. What you're seeing there, line 15 is somewhat, we're going to correct that labeling. It uses the term reserve balance, and that would be more appropriately termed a cash balance in the monies for the capital program. And so it's not that we had a reserve and had funded it to 14 million and suddenly it was gone. It is that those monies, those remaining balance funds will have been spent. Did I say that correctly, Felicia?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to speak there.
Those
So-
are bond revenue funds?
Yeah, they'll be spent, basically. And so,
It kind of moved up to line 11. I mean, it's capital budget, it's being spent,
correct, the money's being spent. And what you're seeing, the main thing I want to point out there is
not all of it.
those aren't really reserves that they're just basically restricted funds that we had set aside for capital. We didn't spend them, so we're coming into this year with that kind of balance in our bank account. But we do expect to spend it all, which is why it goes to zero.
Yeah, you want to get rid of the word reserve.
Yeah, that's
That's what
correct.
I
Thank you,
said.
Tom.
That's what I said.
Yeah, and staff has noted that. It's more of a cash balance. It was-
And so so you just said, two of the three of our reserve goals are met. So
Yeah,
that
that's
isn't even a
right.
reserve goal.
Right, and so the mislabeling of that line is what's the source of
Wait,
confusion.
is that for fiscal year 18-19?
Yeah.
Because we're actually meeting 3 or 4.
Right, okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
OPEB,
Three
emergency,
of three.
operations.
Well, 4.
Yeah, you're right.
Because we really do have a capital reserve policy amount,
Right.
but
Okay,
we haven't met it.
Yeah, I misspoke earlier when I think I said 3. You
Yeah,
have
it's 3 and 4.
OPEB reserve, operations reserve, emergency reserve, all 3 of which are being met. The
OPEB.
4th, which is the capital program reserve, is the one that we have not yet started to.
Yes, the word reserve freaked me out.
Yeah, that's, and I had that note from our prior conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Quick question on our benefit reserve balance. Can we add more to that? Only because I just came from Sacramento about, they still haven't reached their goals with CalPERS. I was just wondering, are we, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, you don't have to comment.
We talked about
Yeah, the board, you guys have covered
We're
this
gonna
pretty
leave it.
extensively earlier. We're very aggressively paying down the OPEB obligation, and I think, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but these are well documented in our responses to the grand jury. The annual obligations that we need to meet to continue to fund our CalPERS obligations are a very, very modest portion of this district's financial obligations.
And the OPEB, this board has discussed fully funding our OPEB outstanding obligations, but at the same time, at the very last meeting, we authorized the expenditure of funds to purchase actuary software that'll help us know what that number is. And so we want to put that in place before we start spending any money.
Yeah.
Because once we spend this money on OPEB, we can't get it back, so we don't want to overpay. But I think that the sense of this board has been that we want to fully fund our OPEB obligations so that we can report that our outstanding OPEB liability is 0.
And that is a very easily, well, I should say readily attainable.
We're pretty close to that.
Yeah, you're very close. Okay.
Yep. Okay. All right, Pam?
Some of this is kind of tedious. I'll just put it off. Hold on one second.
Can I say something, Pam, while you're looking?
Sure.
Well, one of the things I thought was confusing was the percent increase for commercials, and we discussed that.
Yeah.
I forget which.
Right, it's in one of the schedules, yeah.
But it's
Oh, I
because,
think it's on the schedule 2, I think.
percent increase for what?
It went up 16%.
there's a high percent increase of commercial, and it looks like we upped
Right here.
their rates of the high percentage. And it isn't, it's due to the increased count of equivalent dwelling units. And so we asked staff to update that. We don't have it yet, but it's mainly because there's a lot more units that impacted the revenue. It's
Right.
not, the rate
We're
went
not
up
increasing the rate.
7% or
Right.
6%, like everybody else's.
Where would that be?
It's on schedule,
Schedule 2.
schedule 2.
And we'll, We'll come back to the board in the near future with, well, basically before now in the June meeting with some breakouts of the basis for that, because what you're seeing is a reflection of changes in wintertime water use patterns between the commercial properties. That then generates new EDU counts, because we use their individual water use to calculate those. So that is a number that is subject to some volatility depending on actual wintertime water use, and that's what you're seeing driving that. But when you see an 18% change, of course, it's pretty notable. So we want to bring you back a little more of the substantial, or the substantiating information behind that.
Because I think if you go down to the bottom of the table, and you can see the change in equivalent dwellings, look at like Larkspur. Their commercials went from 400 to 487. And I'm wondering if the 400 is correct. I bet that it's higher.
Well, these aren't, don't think of these as physical, actual dwelling units.
No, I know they're multiples.
Right, they're just
So
water
it's
use.
it's equivalent dwelling units.
Yeah.
And I'm betting that it's for fiscal year 18 it's higher
I
than
can shed some
4.
light on that this evening if you'd like.
But it looks like an increase if we use that number, but I think it's
Well,
higher.
I'd also point out on this page, since we're looking at Schedule 2, on the bottom of Schedule 2, the proposed rate increase, which is already in the budget, and if we don't change it, would remain, it would be the new rate increase for this last fiscal year, the last of 5-year
Yeah.
budget plan that you guys did in 2014. It would go for $909 from $856.
Which is 6%.
Which is $53, basically. That's what it is, it's $53. And then Larkspur would go from 1125 to 1178, which is $53.
And it's 5%.
Yeah, but that's because their increases, they have a
Oh,
larger
I know,
store.
but I'm just, instead of looking at the revenue increase, look at the rate change.
Right. I want to, this is really more at the end, but I will say, from all of our areas except Larkspur, we get the rate and we get the ad valorem. Larkspur does not give us any ad valorem. I've reached out to the county of Marin to get some estimates at what our ratepayers are actually paying us in the ad valorem. It's kind of hard because it's based on the value of the home. But if we get a ballpark, I mean, we may find that these rates are not appropriate. So that's for the next 5-year rate schedule. So, but Pam, go ahead. Did you find what you're looking?
I have a bunch of other
Okay,
little
that's fine.
tedious questions that I don't want to bog down the meeting.
No, it's okay.
But I really think if you want that kind of a meeting, where you don't want a lot, because that's not the way I've done budgets, is
No,
it's just.
that's not what I'm
I
saying.
know, but I'm just saying, the expectation is a little different. Usually you have a special meeting, you know, have seen it up and do PowerPoints, but this is okay, I'm just gonna move on.
No,
All right.
hold on, wait a minute, let me address that, okay? The budget discussion is next month. That's on
And
the
that's
agenda.
when we vote on it, yes.
Yeah, but that's,
I
you can
know.
bring all those up.
I think Pam is suggesting maybe a workshop.
And I'm fine with
A
that.
board,
I just haven't, usually in a budget, I spend a lot, Greg knows, I spend a lot of time. I call him, I'll even call Alicia, because I have found thousands of dollars of errors in the past. One time I found a $90,000 error. And ever since then, this is the public's money. I get nervous and I want to make sure I don't miss anything. And I think it's a real public process. So that's all I'm going at. And maybe you want to change things around, that's fine.
Well, I'm not
But-
changing things around. I don't think we did that last budget meeting. I don't think we had a special meeting. I'm not opposed to
No.
having one.
No, it's fine. I'll
We
just
did.
put all my other little questions and emails. Okay, but I do have a question about utilities on page, and I just wanted to know why it went up to 56%.
And
that would
you're
be
on
where-
schedule,
There's no, that's the other thing.
Yeah,
You
we-
can number the pages.
We
yeah, we noticed
From
that.
we talked about that at the finance committee.
We noticed that. Yeah.
What went up 50?
But it's on the schedule. So what
It's not
schedule?
administration, and our utilities went from 25,000,
And?
I know it's a,
Could you, the page tells us- no, the page before it tells us what schedule you're looking at.
no, you gotta keep going.
Oh, administration? Does it say
Yeah, it's
administration?
administration.
Was it utilities that went up?
Yes,
It's administration.
Yeah.
yes, it's administration.
Line what?
We had to pay
The
them.
second page at the top.
2 pages after Schedule 6.
Thank you. We have to pay them.
Facilities?
No,
Yes, yes.
Oh.
How could it go so high?
Utilities administration, the administration page, page 2 of the administration, top of the page, utilities, and I think we raised this issue too, because we talked about the facilities maintenance going down 52% at the financial meeting.
Okay.
Is that the building on Turner? So, anyway, we can deal with it later, but I just questioned that. And
Well,
then-
that's fine. We,
You know what's confusing too, is that it went up 56% because it's compared to the adopted budget, but the budget got revised to $32,000. So it went from $32,000 to about $39,000.
It's
But
clo-
if you take the 56 against the adopted,
it's closer to what we actually spent last year
it's much closer.
than what we thought we were going to spend.
Okay,
And so instead of
okay,
going back to the old budget, we revised it a bit upward
all right.
because it's going up.
well, on the opposite, the facilities went down. Our adopted budget was 84, we spent 53, and this year we're looking at 40. What I did notice, and I think this was good news, is the workman's comp went down substantially. I don't remember what schedule that was. but
Yeah, I
that was
remember I noticed that.
Yeah, but benefits went up really a lot because of the changes in the pension assumptions.
Right, that's a little less under control, but the workman's comp went down because there are less accidents, so our rate went down.
But that's statewide or organization-wide, isn't it?
That's, yes, for the CSRNA risk pool.
Joint organizations.
Our information technology did go up. Do you remember?
Yeah, there's there's at least 2 significant server replacements, and there's also the IT security audit that we're expecting.
That's $30,000.
Yeah.
You know, every agency should do this internet security, IT security.
I just have a couple, then I'll send the rest. There's overtime increase of 61%. And I was curious,
One time went up and one went down.
saw that. Is there, we have a policy around overtime? Do they have to?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
the overtime
emergency's different.
Yeah, you have written,
Is that in maintenance or operations?
Operations, right here.
Operations.
yeah.
Standby overtime went down.
Yeah.
Training.
Okay, here we go.
We'll hear in a while.
See, the big number there though is line 2, benefits and payroll taxes. And we see percentage changes, but they're on small number.
Yeah.
But here's a big one, that's several $100,000.
Where's
Well,
that?
not from the revised.
That's on page 2, I mean line
Operations.
2 of operations.
Top of the page says operations.
It's right where your
Oh,
overtime.
page 2.
It's right where the
Yeah.
overtime. That's a big ticket item.
But look at the revised. The revised was 24/7, so almost 25. We went from 25 to 28.
Right.
So it's still a lot. It's still a lot of money, absolutely.
Because it's
I'm
compared
sorry.
to the adopted budget.
I'm sorry, wait a minute. From 1.5 to 1.6, and it was, the
1.2.
adopted was 1.2, so we already got screwed.
And that's why, well, no, that's what it's compared with.
Yeah.
the adopted.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's correct.
So we'll have a lot of time to do this next month.
And look, I'm not opposed to a special meeting. The budget's a big thing. Do you really like to do that, Pam?
What?
Would you like to have a meeting just on the budget? I'm fine with that.
I don't know. I mean, I just want to be really transparent. If we're going to ask for a rate increase, which is what it's, already out there floating, the idea.
Well, hang on, the rate increase for the last year?
You're right. Not this coming year,
Right.
but you have put in here the forecast, you're starting to forecast 5 years
Yeah.
out, and so
Well,
we've got
that's,
it,
we're gonna spend 4 months on that.
right, but you have it in the package, in the packet, so I don't know. All right,
Well,
I think,
let me touch on that. That's why I called and I sent an email, which I copied our general manager on, to the Marin County Tax Assessor's Office, property tax, because I don't think, and this is, it's gonna be 4 months, we have no idea what the ratepayer in San Anselmo is paying versus the ratepayer in Larkspur. We have no idea. This numbers, the rates are just the rates. The ad valorem is wholly, completely different. If a San Anselmo resident is paying us 909 plus 500, and a Larkspur resident is paying us 1178 plus 100, well, San Anselmo's getting screwed. If it's the other way around, Larkspur's getting screwed. We need to figure it out. And it's not perfect because the ad valorem is based on the value of the home, but we're gonna get some averages from the tax assessor, and that's gonna be in the 4-month discussion, because I don't think anybody really looked at that. I think they kind of put a number on Larkspur needs to pay a little bit more because they don't have ad valorem, but the ad valorem's a lot of money for people in Larkspur, Fairfield, Fairfax, Ross, Kenfield, and Sleepy Hollow. They're paying a lot of money. And we gotta make sure that's fair. Talk about transparency. I wanna make sure that's transparent.
Is it a
anyway.
percentage?
Yeah,
Is it a percentage
it's
of-
4.2% of the ad valorem tax collected, but that is based on the assessed value of the home. And so you can't do it for every home, well, you could, but that would take more money than would be worth it. But I've asked them to kind of average it out on single-family homes, multiple-family homes, and commercial buildings in each of those, San Anselmo, Fairfax, Kent Woodlands, Kentfield, Ross, Sleepy Hollow, Murray Hill. We'll see what,
We'll find out that the residential share is much higher than
we, I'm sure we will. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah?
That was it. Yeah, I'll just,
What do you feel about a budget meeting?
I've gone over it really carefully. And I say maybe what we do is if there are a lot of questions, a lot of comments, let's have to decide if we need a special meeting to go over it.
Okay, well, how about this? Why don't we take the comments that we get within 2 weeks, and we talk about it at the financial meeting, but at the next full board meeting, we could always not adopt the budget for another meeting. I mean, if we could.
Well, ideally, you should be adopting the budget in June for the start of the fiscal year on July 1st.
Okay.
Well, my feeling is if we want to ask staff, why are these variances so large? Let's
Put
do
them in there.
that.
Just
You
put them
don't
in.
have to have a meeting to do that,
No, we
right?
don't, yeah.
And then, to Tom's point, it's one thing to say, oh, there's this huge variance that amounts to $5,000 in a multi-million dollar budget. So if we're going to look at the percentage changes, let's look at the big ones.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So like how we address the pipes.
Yeah.
I always say I don't need another meeting. And I hope that we could work through this and that staff can answer any question that any board member or the finance committee has, like on one-offs. I mean, they provided us with these variances, so if we want to tag the big ones and say more details, more details, more
Yeah,
details.
you just say,
We should do that.
we also suggested that they page number,
Yeah.
No, we did. We asked that at the budget meeting. We asked to have the whole through.
So, no,
But that doesn't mean we need a meeting.
No, it doesn't.
no, but if we come back and want to rush through on a final, and there's more questions, we'll just see how it goes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm really kind of bummed out
I don't-
that I cannot sit in a financial meeting because I have before. I have.
And in fact, I was running them and I was taking questions from a board member and I was advised I can't do that. So that was news to me.
Well, then, if you want to represent yourself, how do you do that? How do you do that? Because I know I've been to many Fairfax
You can
town council
represent
meetings.
yourself in front of the agency as a member of the public. But the Brown Act, and I'll find it and forward it to you, but it is pretty clear on other board members attending committees that
Of
are
their own.
less than a quorum, that it turns into a quorum. Unless you're just observing, so you can sit and watch, but what you're talking about is more interactive, which is
Well, you said
problematic.
bring all these questions, so
Well, and I asked the same question because I was talking about
I didn't know that.
on the San Anselmo Town Council, I've seen board members leave the room and then come back, and by the way, get recused on an issue, come back and stand in line and speak at open time. And that was because it wasn't a subcommittee, it was the full board meeting, and that was allowed.
Okay.
It was the subcommittee thing that was the little goofy-duffy.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, you could also have a full board meeting instead of a Thursday.
Absolutely.
You could have a whole board if you want.
Okay. Any questions?
Not now.
Okay, can I have, anything from the public? Thank you. Anything from the public? Okay, can I have a motion?
So what?
We don't have to do it.
We're saying approving.
Oh, we have to.
Accept, we have to accept.
Accept, not adopt, but accept. I move that we accept the draft FY 18-19 budget and direct staff to issue the fiscal year 18-19 rate notice.
I'll second.
Wait. Say that again?
So we're
issuing
we're providing direction to issue the fiscal year 18-19 rate notices as was originally enumerated in 2014.
So we can do that without a finalized draft?
Yes.
Correct.
Without a
Because
final
they were
budget.
already done via the
I think-
Prop 218.
Oh, that's right, this is the last
I
year.
think that any changes we make to the budget aren't going to have anything close to the impact to affect the need for a rate increase.
The rate increase that was previously approved in
The
2014.
previously approved rate increase, which, as we know, even with this rate increase, we're still in a capital deficit. And we're in the midst of a major capital improvement program. This year is at 31 million. 31 million. That's more than our operating budget and debt service and everything else combined. And so, it more than doubles our budget, and that's why we have to finance it. And so we're trying to reduce the amount of financing that we're doing, right? Management of pay-as-you-go, but we're not there yet.
So on this, when we send out the Prop 18 notice,
That's
No.
not what's happening.
No,
No.
It's a
next year.
but,
information notice.
Yeah, the
But
the
I'm
rate
just-
notice is different.
so what I'm hearing is that we're going to premise it on still, I didn't quite catch everything you said.
Okay, so let me, in 2014, you did a 5-year Prop 218 rate increase public notice. Those 5-year rate increases were set in 2014, and they haven't changed. We're talking about the next 5 years in October through March. We're not talking about the next 5 years now. We're simply saying the last year needs to proceed as was originally designed in 2014.
That's fine.
Can I just add one note to that? When the board adopted the 5 years in 2014, it was important to some board members, like Pam, that every year the board have an opportunity to really decide, do we want to do the full amount or do we want to do something less? So to be clear, tonight you are saying for the next fiscal year, you want to do the up to amount that you approved in 2014, and staff has demonstrated that there are reasons to do that and that it wouldn't make sense financially to do less than that. So you are, in a sense, locking that portion of the budget in, and the only reason is because you have to send the notices out by June 1. And so you have to make that decision in May, even though you adopt the budget formally in June.
We're locking in the revenue part of the budget, not the
The
expenditure.
sewer service charge rate only.
Right.
Yeah, only that portion of the revenue, correct.
And that's true.
And it goes up $53 for everybody.
Yeah, it's 6.2 or something.
But it's $53. That's what it is.
Wow.
It's a different rate for Larkspur because
Right.
they're already starting at a higher number.
Thank you for clarifying that, because there was a lot of,
There was a lot of confusion, yeah, in 2015, there was a lot of discussion
and so
about
we were
that.
going to look at what could we do and not do, and make sure that we could prove to the community that we really needed that much money to raise the rates that high every year. Thank you.
Everybody has to do this, right? Everybody that collects on the property tax has to do this.
Send out
Everybody in
reports.
Marin County does this.
And then they have to do the follow-up
Yeah.
in July to send the rolls over to the county, correct?
So I need a motion.
And I seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. I'd like to move on to number 8, consideration of awarding and authorizing the general manager upon review and approval of council to execute construction contract for the fiscal year 2016-17 Lane, gravity sewer improvement project, Nokomis and Meadowcroft, with Majario and Gelati Incorporated, in the amount not to exceed $4,077,077.
Yes.
So we're about to spend $4 million here possibly. Can I have a staff report?
Yes, you can. And Catherine Hayden and others are here to address any questions on this. So this is the construction award here is the final step in a really a long series of steps that the board has been taking the last couple of years. We originally had what we called the FY16-17 gravity sewer improvements project, covering more work than you see here, but we have, because of bid results and so forth, and also timing of construction issues, we have broken this up into 3 packages that are going to occur over 3 construction seasons. So what you're seeing now is bid package, what we would call bid package number 1 of what was originally 1 project, but is now going to be 3 projects. Each will be separately bid, to be clear. What you have in front of you this evening is just the first one. This went through the standard public bidding process. If you turn to page 2 of the staff report, you can see the bid results. In today's bidding environment for us in most of the Bay Area, having 3 responsive qualified bidders was a pretty good turnout. What you'll also notice, and is also very common throughout the Bay Area on the negative side, is that the bid costs are all substantially 30% plus higher than engineer's estimate. And that's a trend, again, that we've seen and that basically virtually all the other Bay Area utility agencies are seeing because of the construction environment that we're operating in. So staff's recommendation is to go ahead and award the construction contract to Majario and Gelati as the lowest responsible bidder. This will allow this phase of the 3 projects to go forward, which is very important in the sense of the linkages with the next 2 construction seasons. We have picked these 2 after very extensive coordination with the city of San Anselmo and with Marin Municipal Water District and with, to a lesser degree, but quite importantly with Marin County, because of these are the projects that we've talked about in the past that have a big impact over 3 summers with the entire Butterfield Road, Sleepy Hollow area, because of you have a major MWD capital project going, you have some major San Anselmo road work going, et cetera. So the point being, this is the first in a long sequence of coordinated construction activities over the next 3 construction seasons in this area. So that's just kind of for background. We will, I won't go into any great detail at this point. You can see the project map and locations. And with that, I'll hand it back to the board, and we have staff here to answer any questions.
Well, first off, I'll point out, when we do all 3, when we've completed all 3, we'll see what the percent above estimate ended up being. Maybe one of them is Big McGill that we don't know. But this was bid at 106% prior.
Oh,
And this is at 30% above, as opposed to 106% above. So that was some substantial savings. But again,
But
we may find.
it's only a portion.
That's right.
You're comparing apples and oranges.
Well, we
We
may, if the other 2 come down at 30% over estimate, then we're not.
I
If
see,
one of
I
them-
see,
yeah.
in aggregate.
Yeah, that's right.
And pat ourselves on the back. right?
So far, yeah, so far we can. When the next one comes in at 290% above,
Well,
then we kick ourselves.
So there was, I'll add one other thing, there was an additional consideration, and you'll see this, we'll talk a little bit about this on the next construction contract award. We are trying to get the packages as homogeneous as possible in terms of the type of construction activity. So if there's a need for relatively specialized construction techniques like tunneling and so forth, we don't want to bundle those with more standardized open cut construction with the idea that certain contractors are more incentivized to bid on certain types of work.
That's right.
So if we can separate those out and take the specialized work and give it long lead times, we also think that'll foster more competitive bids. So there's a number of considerations coming into how we're packaging these.
That's right, we talked about that.
These coconut projects, yeah. And the fact that you got 3 bids on this sort of says, in this case, it worked. We took the more traditional, what I call the more traditional construction method activity, put that into one package, and sure enough, we got 3 bids from 3 pretty traditional underground contractors in the area. So in that sense, it did achieve what we were looking for it to do.
And is either Meadowcroft or McCamus open cut, or these?
Catherine?
Yes, a lot of both of
Okay, in both?
that, in both, yes.
And this is the one where we're sharing the road cost as well.
No, that's Sleepy Hollow.
It's
Oh, wait,
part of the
it's the
entire
bypass.
package.
I'm sorry, you're right,
Yes,
right
yes.
behind Brookside School. Yes,
So we're sharing with the water district and.
Town of San Anselmo and the Water District. Correct.
that's right behind Brookside School.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions, other questions?
No, but I think that Magior and July guy, his lucky number is 7.
He likes to repeat numbers. It could be 89.
Really?
Yeah, there's typically a repeat of numbers.
How he does.
This isn't just a spreadsheet, spitting out a number, it's
There
like.
must be some place he matches it up. to
Lucky
get it. 7.
And when was the engineer's estimate done, and does it reflect market rates, or is it, what? Is it lower because we did it a while ago, or?
It was redone,
It
wasn't
was reviewed and revised, and Marin has been that. So it did go up slightly from the estimate that was in the much larger package looking at recent projects.
it? Maybe we want to hire engineers that, if they win the bid, they've got to make up the difference.
A lot of high estimates.
Then we can be happy.
Pam?
Make a joke about it.
30%, is that what we're gonna be paying over what we think?
Yes.
That's what the
So
engineers estimate.
I had concern because I think this is a trend.
I think it
This
is
is over
fine.
$1 million extra, and I just came from Sacramento. I'm wondering, is this legal? To
Yes.
overbid this high and within a group of contractors? I mean, we have to do the work, obviously, right? But we're having to pay
Right.
What
over.
would be
Are you-
illegal?
Are you suggesting they're getting together and
I
deciding?
don't know,
to come
I don't
in?
know, it's
I
really
don't see how they get
interesting.
together when one's bid is almost
No.
double the percentage.
But anyway, I've never seen this.
No, I know,
Never
you and I
seen this.
talked a little bit
You've never
about this
seen
on the
what?
phone.
This bid, have this bidding to be this
Yeah.
high.
In other words,
Well,
the
we've
fact that.
seen it here.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. This project is 1/3 of a project that we turned down because that bid came out at 106% above.
Right, so now we're down to 30%, but go
Right.
ahead, Greg.
Well, what I was going to say, so we talked a little bit about this, I mean, and what I was pointing out is, it just came back last month, you know, from a meeting of general managers from about 15 agencies. And this is a trend that we've seen very clearly. 25 to 50% construction cost increases year on year for major projects. It's somewhat dependent on the nature of the work. If you're doing above ground, you know, building facilities, bridges versus underground work, et cetera. But in general, for water and wastewater utility underground work, these are the trends that you're seeing across the Bay Area. And yes, they're really unfortunate and kind of galling for us, but they are the construction market, and they're a reflection of a whole host of factors, the most basic ones being an incredible demand for capital projects in the Bay Area right now, the amount of work that's going on. And as you know, just all the other inflationary factors right now, workforce inflationary factors, you name it. So,
Retirements.
yeah, now this is, again, I'll point this out to the board, because in the past, ironically, there are times when the opposite is the case, right? When the economy is in recession, there's not a lot of demand for capital work. The tendency for a lot of public agencies is to sort of close up and not spend any money because the economy looks bad. But what a lot of utilities have learned over the years is that that's actually the time when, if you kept your powder dry and you've got some money in the bank and you've got the projects ready, that's when you put them out. And the flip side of this is you're getting extremely competitive bids. We just happen to be at the opposite end of the business cycle at the moment. But we don't have we simply don't have the practical option of putting some of these projects off. So it's one of the risks we deal with.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Are engineers, are you reevaluating the estimate? Are you seeing this from your construction estimates when this is a reality? And
Yeah, when we start seeing a trend, then we will talk to our estimators and we'll escalate things
they
accordingly.
can ask us, we've seen it.
And Jill and Eric, we, looked at a lot of other agencies and called and asked about recent projects. And we did see that 25 to 30 trend was there for some projects. That was relatively common.
Agenda item 9, above estimate, 29%.
Pretty consistent.
So we're seeing it.
Spoiler alert.
By the way, this is 1/3. Can you refresh me? What are the other 2/3, the second and the third project? Because it's not the one that's agenda item number 9.
No, it's not. Catherine, do you want to describe the remaining two?
Because one of them wasn't one to Sleepy Hollow where we had a 29-foot?
Correct.
The second summer would be, yes, the
And that's gonna come
very
in
deep
hot.
excavation at Butterfield and Meadowcroft with tunneling two directions. And so there's some deep open cut and specialty construction.
On this one?
To get from the Green Line, to get from there in Meadowcroft into Butterfield and up to Arroyo.
The next one.
And
Yeah.
the next one, correct.
That's the 29-foot.
Yes.
So that's where we're going to see a commit to 7%. And we won't be able to pat ourselves on the back.
Is that open?
No, our engineers are gonna get wise.
There's some open cut, but it's, the deep excavation is boring. That would be-
And I think we did suggest that on that, you contact boring companies, equipment companies that sell boring to find out who they're selling it to and make sure you bid out as widely as you can, rather than just the area here. That's specialized. That's going to be really expensive if we only have one bid because there's only one guy in the area. So you really got to go, SoCal, NoCal,
Yeah.
Nevada. I mean, who cares? They can put it on a truck and drive it here.
Well, that's why we emphasize timing on this next phase of this one, because the earlier you get it out, they're 6 months out. So if we're putting bids out in March for work that needs to get done in late June through August, that's problematic. And I don't know, Jill, how many, we did do some pre-qualification for the pilot two contractors, and we received 3 proposals. So we already have some people who were interested when it went out the first time. So
And that's not going out to bid though, or it has gone out?
it was in the package that we rejected.
It was in the package that we rejected.
Right.
That was last year.
Last, a couple months back.
Right.
So it will be coming back to you in the near future for authorization to bid just that bid package to Butterfield, Meadowcroft, Arroyo, which has that specialty construction. But this time when it goes out to bid, it will be a narrower focus on that specialized work. We've done the outreach to those contractors in the state, and there'll be much more lead time for them to get aligned with this if they're interested in it.
So they don't have to do it next month.
Right, if we give them too short of a timeline for specialty contractors, then you really put yourself in a bind, they're
That's
likely
right.
to be unresponsive.
Right. Okay. I urge you to do everything you can to get even more than 3 interested in that project. Okay. Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion.
I move we authorize the general manager upon review and approval of council to execute construction contract for fiscal year 2016-17 gravity sewer improvement projects, Nokomis and Meadowcroft, with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder in Majora and July, in an amount not to exceed $4,077,077.
Also,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Okay, I'd like to move on to discuss further analysis. Let's spend some more.
this is only 3 minutes.
Yeah, this is hardly anything at all. Number 9, consideration of awarding and authorizing the general manager upon review and approval of council to execute construction contract for large diameter Gravity Sewer Project 2-3A, Upper Shady Lane, Ross Commons, with Ranger Pipelines Incorporated, in the amount not to exceed $3,220,670.
So Ranger's coming to Ross.
Yes.
Did Ranger learn how to work with
Supposed to
Tanya
come.
Road,
It's
so
not
we're gonna be
called-
okay in Ross?
Good, I think so.
Okay, great.
Confirmed.
So Ranger was involved with the property owner in Kent Woodlands,
Thank you.
Yeah.
and yes.
We're working on their customer service skills.
Is it really Ross Common?
Yeah, with no S, yeah.
But when
There's
you
no
drive
big
down the
common.
street, the sign just says Ross.
Ross Common?
No, is it Ross Common or is it Ross? The city?
Ross Common is.
Is the center
Oh.
place?
The work area will be in Ross Commons. So I'll just do a really brief overview because this story is going to sound really familiar to the board. So this was the large diameter gravity sewer project, which we purposely started out a couple of years back with a strategy to deliver it in the largest, most consolidated construction contracts we could. Thinking that was the best way to do that. And again, because of the trends in the market caught up with us, we ended up with a first result that was 120%, 123% over engineer's estimate. We took the same basic strategy. We broke out the work into the more homogeneous packages with similar types of work, and then looked at, in terms of any timing and practical issues. And so what you have before you is the first bid package of that repackaged work. This is very high-profile work I want to emphasize. It is work that is occurring in the Ross Commons area, which I think all the board members are familiar with. It's a very popular spot, kind of the center of the community of Ross. But we do think this is the best way to approach it in terms of coming in and getting that work done as the first step. When it went out to bid, in this case, we did only get one bidder, Ranger Pipeline. They were deemed responsive and responsible, and similar to the prior results that we just looked at with Majora Gelati, their bid was about 29% above engineer's estimate. So at this point, with all the same considerations in mind that we just discussed, staff's recommendation is to go ahead and award the bid. We, of course, hate to see those kinds of year-on-year cost increases, but you can, again, this is the market that we're dealing in. And I would also say, we can't know for sure, but at this point, you've got Ranger, Majora Gelati, you've got a couple of contractors heavily mobilized in the area. That would tend to give them a more competitive edge in terms of already being active and working. I don't know if that's what we're seeing, but in this case, 30% above engineer's estimate is kind of par for the course. So staff's recommendation is to go ahead and approve the award to Ranger Pipelines for the project. And with that, I'll hand it back to the board, and we can answer any questions.
So with both of these projects, I hope we're doing a lot of public outreach.
Yes.
Wow.
We
Yes.
did that last month, right?
And
We authorized-
the authorization that the board provided on that new task order has already been, it is being put to
Are you getting signs?
very active use, yeah. So
they
there's,
just had signs on my street.
yeah, well, there's going to be more. There won't be, these ones shouldn't be on your street, but, so no, in all seriousness, the work that the board authorized under that new task order for the construction-focused community outreach is off to a fantastic start. Mary Brown and the communications team have already set up meetings with all of the major project teams. They've developed standard templates for advanced outreach, everything from city council presentations to neighborhood targeted outreach. Working with the construction management and the project management team to go through and identify those for each specific project. So we're in the early stages, but I would say literally in the month since you approved that, the activity is already ramping up substantially. So.
I'm seeing Ranger Pipeline there with a backhoe digging on Lagunitas Road. What's that?
That's the small diameter project. I think that's the 15-16. So the rehabilitation, the small diameter rehabilitation, one of the areas was Ross for that project. So, and they did build a very, basically built a connection between the small diameter and Ames and Lagunitas going into this pipeline in this project, so it does connect exactly.
Since this is a large diameter, I assume this is all open cut.
This
Pipers.
is mostly not, it's
Really?
mostly pipers.
Yeah, mostly
Really?
pipers.
Good to know. So that would be as disruptive. Um,
Open cutting across the common is something we would.
What's that?
Okay.
Okay. I just also want to say that I want Tom Gaffney to serve as our emissary and stand down at the Ross Post Office and tell
Thank
everybody
you.
that this is, that we're not trying to ruin their world.
I'll hear about it.
Yeah, you don't have to be there. They know your number.
And do you have questions?
If you go to the council, I'd like to go.
Okay.
Yeah, seriously, Marin, take him along. He's a lifelong, right, lifelong Ross resident?
Virtually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
How long is the project? How long will it take?
Duration?
Yes,
To end?
calendar days, I think, less than a year, but it'll go into.
And isn't it during the summer mostly?
summer, start summer 2018.
That is a long
Start
summer.
winter 2018.
There's a small piece that is required to be done in the summer, and that's to get out of Lagunitas. So they need to do that work, school is out. And that was partly what we did in the repackaging here, was to give them more time to do this work. So we gave them significantly more time for this work and have a relatively small constraint on when work.
They'll be able to take advantage then of our lateral program, right, on this or not?
There's not too many laterals on this part of the,
No?
there's very few homes. It's right in front of Ross School, it's in front of the post office.
Okay.
There's a couple of
There's
school
some-
laterals, and maybe one or two others.
And you were forced to with your.
Force me. All right,
One second. I was curious about that question about the signs. Are signs being made for all of these projects? Street signs, sandwich boards?
I believe, yeah, the short answer is yes. The details on them are I think, are in development.
Okay.
But do you guys want to?
As I mentioned at that, when we talked about that, with $30 million of projects in the road,
Yep.
I think it would be beneficial to the Ross Valley Sanitary District to have our signs on these projects. Maybe people will complain, at least they'll complain out loud, transparent.
Right.
And they'll know who to complain
They'll
to.
know who to complain to, but also they'll see that the work's being done and their money's being spent wisely. I think that's,
Yeah, we'll send it to the chair.
so we're on
I
that.
think one of the first signs we were looking to get was to get something up at Pump Station 15. So we're gonna be doing work there, not really directly.
How
I
disruptive
wanted signs on the
Driving
construction
on the
projects.
path.
is it going to be very disruptive? Is that the bicycle lane that goes to the church kind of area?
It's by the.
Oh, no, I'm thinking further back.
Yeah, so can you guys just clarify, I mean, for current practices right now, if you were to go out to a typical major construction project, what would you see out there for project identifying signs?
It should be a sign that goes up 2 weeks before construction at either end of a site.
But it's not up during the project.
It should stay up.
Starts 2 weeks ahead and stays there, and it has what basic information?
Well, this one might need more than one sign though.
At each site, yeah, at each location.
Yeah.
And we've gotten feedback that that's been missed on some of the small diameter sites.
Right.
But that's the requirement. For this one, looking at opportunities for additional.
Well, what I'm suggesting
Prominent
is that
sign.
the district purchased some sandwich boards
Standard sign.
that are standard size, that like, we put out, the Chamber of Commerce puts out when we have an event, it sits on the, and it's got the Ross Valley Sanitary District logo, and it says a project done by Ross Valley. It doesn't have to say anything more, because it's something you should be moving around. You should have 20 or 30 of these signs.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
And I
Yeah, it was
don't-
very clear, because where I live is a very narrow lane, and
Right.
the way you signed it for Laurel was really good, because people come around that corner, and you did have even a flag on there, so.
We've even been looking at, in some cases, the banners across the roads in certain areas for some of the major projects. So I don't know if they've gotten far enough in the conversations yet, because it's been pretty quick. But Mary, is there any, in terms of where the project teams have gotten at, is there any clarity is good.
Identifying where we would put banners and then also have pop-up activities like at the post office and other places where we could be there for one day and have fact sheets and answer questions. And then, of course, yeah,
Okay, do I have a motion?
I move we award to and authorize the general manager upon review of the Borough Council to execute construction contract with a large gravity sewer project 2-3A, Upper Shady Lane, Ross Common, with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Ranger Pipelines, in the amount not to exceed $3,220,674.
Also. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? And that motion carries, and with that, $7 million. Okay. Discussion and direction on submitting a comment letter to the Larkspur Landing General Plan Update Committee for the 2000 Larkspur Landing Circle property. That's number 10.
Yeah. So the board talked briefly about this at an early May special meeting, and we got feedback on the content of the proposed comment letter. But again, the background here, just to remind everyone, the Larkspur's in the middle of their general plan update. They have a committee made up of a couple of council members and some citizens, and they are going through a long process through most of this calendar year, I believe, to address certain, each of the major areas of the general plan and refresh them where they see necessary. And the reason this came to our attention was we realized that the current approved specific plan and the land use zoning that is assigned to the district property of 2000 Larkspur Landing, there was no concern per se with the land use types. The concern that was raised was the fact that because way back in 2005 and 6, over 10 years ago at this point, the site was actually divided up into specific zones that were based on a very specific development proposal from a private contract developer at that time, and those the site layout by those zones was basically codified through the approval of a specific plan, or a precise plan, I believe is the term they used. And all this action occurred at the city of Larkspur back in about 2005-6, and it's what's still on the books. And so the purpose of the comment letter is simply to let them know that the Planning Commission and ultimately the Larkspur City Council be aware that the Ross Valley Sanitary District would prefer. We don't have any concerns with the zoning itself, and we're not asking for any changes, but we would like the lines essentially to be removed. I know there's a more technical way to put that from a planning professional perspective, but the practical purpose being that, the site has such an uncertain future. We would like to. We think it's in everybody's interest, both the community's interest and Ross Valley's interest, that you can retain the goals of the current zoning in terms of housing units and so forth, but try to get, if you can, let's remove the highly specific layout that's almost 15 years old at this point, so that when this site hopefully is ready for its future use, it won't be bound by these. Again, almost 15-year-old, this specific private development plan that's really no longer in effect at this point. So that's the purpose of the comment letter, and what the staff's recommendation is. If you have any changes to it, great. If not, it goes out under the board president's name, and it goes to the city of Larkspur to get these concerns on the record. And then it's really just opening the dialogue at this point, because the general plan update process, from what we understand, is going to run through a good part of this calendar year. And then, ultimately there'll be some steps at the city council level, I assume in early calendar year 2019. So there's plenty of time on this. This is just kind of the opening dialogue on making the zoning a little less precise, put it that way.
Have you talked to city staff about this, about having
Yeah.
this been discussed?
Yeah, we've had, we'll run in the run-up to this, even before, we were already having discussions because we wanted to do some interim site upgrades to our operations base there. And that's part of what brought this to our attention. And we have definitely given staff at the city a heads up. Actually, prior to the last time you saw this in early May, we had reached out to the planning director and others to let them know that we'd be providing these comments so they weren't, caught off guard by it, and letting them know what the intent was. We have not heard back, I should clarify, or from Roxbury staff on any concerns with this so far.
Tom, you were the one who had concerns last time. Do you have concerns today?
No, I actually got my questions. What we're trying to do is make the use of this land more flexible.
Yeah.
For some, not limited to what they were thinking about.
Right. This was a very specific guy's plan. This is what he wanted to do, and his plan was approved. It never came to fruition, and it's never going to come to fruition, probably. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he'll get out again. But this was a very specific plan. It's like saying you have a 2-acre parcel and somebody's come with architectural drawings for a house and it's approved, and then he dies and 5 years later you say, we gotta build that house. The guy's gone.
Also, the park located for public facilities is now right near some
Housing.
housing since 15 years ago when it was constructed.
Right.
Wait,
Okay.
I don't know anything about zoning, but it seems to me, and I was the one who was like, I'm sure there's some legal way to say erasing the lines, right? But it seems to me, isn't it that we can have it zoned for multi-uses, or do we have to say, it seems, anyway, imprecise to me to say, we just want these boundaries, and then you can use it for these multiple purposes.
they're the
Isn't it
ones-
like a level of zoning? You would say like, all use,
I think, I don't have a specific answer, but I think what we've done in this letter is to say, here's our concern, we're gonna defer to you on how you resolve it.
Yeah.
And so in the context of exactly what the zoning looks like, as long as it's resolved,
Okay.
it doesn't really matter.
It seems to me like the more precise thing might eventually be to just say, we want you to zone the entire parcel, do whatever you want with it.
No, I don't think I'd say that. They've already got it zoned for these particular
Okay,
uses.
but here's kind of a dilemma. We've got some of it zoned out for public facilities. And what if they decide to eliminate?
What if we decide to eliminate it? Who says we want it?
They're
Who said
gonna
we
do
don't?
whatever they're gonna do.
Right, no, I agree.
Maybe we really want
We
it
have no control
eventually.
over it, really.
We're in a place to park
We
our
have no control over it.
and so maybe we do want it.
Right.
They
Well,
say no.
he's got a whole back lot we can borrow.
My only other comment would be that parties on the top of the last should be, that's a plural parties, so shouldn't it be P-A-R-T-I-E-S?
Apostrophe.
Some people get annoyed with me, but
No, it's zoned for party benefit.
for both parties.
Party.
Yeah, I don't think I would want us to ask them to change the zoning, although they could. It's Larkspur's zoning right, but.
I don't know, like I say, I don't know how zoning works, but I don't think it works as, here's a bunch of land, and you can use it for a bunch of purposes. Like, the whole idea is to say, we're gonna tell you what the person, how it can be used.
Well,
I think what happened, they color it in.
Yeah.
Well, so
That's what they do.
I think, and this is qualified by, I'm also not a planner, but my understanding of the history on this site, which I don't think is terribly unusual, is it got to this level of specificity that you see today over a series of years and steps. So it actually did start out with, here's this parcel, and initially it had, I think, 3 or 4 allowable zoning uses applied to it. Then the interested parties took that and went through steps to turn it into a more specific plan, and then ultimately became what the terminology used locally as a precise plan where they literally got down to the building layouts and exactly where things were at. And that was, you can see that progression in a series of ordinances that were passed by the city of Larkspur. I think I referenced them maybe briefly in the staff report, but those ordinances you'll see do exactly, they start out quite general, and then they get a little more specific, and by the time you get to the third resolution, they're approving, they've gone from the 3 or 4 general categories down to this very specific, precise plan, which is literally approving that developer's layout and development of the site. So that it is not unusual to have that kind of open level of general zoning guidance, I'd call it, and then over time get to the highly precise one. And we're sort of saying, no problem with the categories, but back it up
Right.
to the more general
Right.
application. And as you guys have, we've all noted, we defer to you, the planning professionals,
Right.
to say that in the way it needs to be said.
And Pam was saying, they're gonna do whatever they want anyway, right? So we don't need to.
Yeah.
We don't have any power.
Yeah,
Right.
we don't.
We're
And
just
Michael,
saying,
oh,
Michael Cooper
request.
doesn't show up here anymore,
Yeah.
so
If you wanna
clearly we don't, he doesn't think he has a
It's a request.
dog in this fight.
Yeah, they're having a public process. We're a stakeholder with a major parcel that has a very important impact on the housing future of Larkspur and so forth. We're simply providing these comments for their consideration. And you are correct. We don't have control over that outcome. We just make the request.
question on the staff report. It says on here, where's attachment 1? Did I leave something out of my packet and I did it?
No.
Where's attachment 1?
I think maybe it's attachment A.
You mean the
It
ordinance
says
tab?
complete file agreement is included as attachment 1. Where?
Oh,
where is it?
are you one step report ahead? I think you're on a different.
Yeah, we're not on that agenda item yet, we're on the test.
Any other questions on 10? Okay, can I have a motion?
Tom, do you want this one?
I did this.
No. I authorize the board president, oh, no, I don't. I move that we authorize the board president in coordination with legal counsel to issue the attached letter to the general plan update committee.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. Okay, number 11.
Point of order, I'd like to take a break.
Okay.
Get out of it.
I'd like to anyway, 5-minute break, 11 minutes. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order, and thank you for your patience. And I'd like to move on to agenda item number 11, consideration of approval of the updated Central Marin Sanitation Agency Joint Powers Authority agreement. And with that, I'd like a staff report, and I know that Jason Dow, the general manager of the Central Marin Sanitation Department, is here, and patiently waiting. Thank you very much.
Okay, so well, this action before the board this evening has got about a 2-year history to it, believe it or not. So the effort to update the CMSA Joint Powers Authority Agreement started about 2 years ago, originally with the general managers noting a number of out-of-date issues and so forth that we were running into. We did a collective review over time, and then once we felt like we had something substantial enough to bring forth, we shared that with all the respective boards and made the recommendation to consider starting a process to actually formally update the Joint Powers Authority Agreement. And all of the boards agreed to that recommendation and to start that process. That led to the formation of the JPA Agreement Ad Hoc Committee, or the Update Agreement Ad Hoc Committee. They started their work about a year ago, and that work was sort of structured and facilitated largely by Jason, and the general managers mostly just tried to provide support to that process. The ad hoc committee made its way through the topics in 5 overall groupings. Those groupings, as they got done, were each then taken to each of the respective boards for review and feedback, and then finalized with the ad hoc committee. And that process has been completed. And in the last go-around, as far as any further refinements, there were some final refinements done based on legal counsel review with some cleanup of some language and standardization of terms, and also clarification of some indemnification language. Really the last substantial topics that were dealt with had to do with the withdrawal language, which we think there's been compromise language worked out that everyone has agreed to. And we want to just at a very high level point out some of the areas that have been addressed in the new draft agreement, because again, it's proposed to replace almost a 40-year-old agreement. You've got some very practical areas that are addressed in the new agreement, things like clarification of ownership and operations and maintenance responsibilities for all of the joint facilities. There was a lot of gray area there in the original agreement, which, remember, was written before any of this was built. There were substantial updates to the powers of the CMSA JPA to address lessons learned and concerns going forward to clarify the powers that the JPA has. There were updates to the basis for how the members pay, the cost, basically the cost allocations are updated and allocated, and also substantial updates to language on how the authority can manage its long-term debt, issue bonds and so forth, or other financial obligations, and how those get approved and supported by the member agencies. There were changes to the settlement of disputes to reflect some lessons learned from the past. And again, I already mentioned the clarification of ownership and operation and maintenance of the facilities. So a lot of the updates were certainly essentially cleanup and cosmetic, because again, they were just old language that was no longer necessary. But there was really a substantial number of very material updates to important areas of the agreement. So at this point, what you have in front of you is what I'd call the final draft that I think the majority of the CMSA board has indicated support for passage. The City of Corte Madera, Sanitary District Number 2, has already acted and approved the new agreement. We, based on what I've heard from the other general managers, we're expecting San Rafael San District to consider it in the first week of June. And the City Council of Larchburg to consider it at their first City Council meeting early in the month of June as well. I will point out, because it's clearly the last remaining point of concern, there are no changes to this current agreement regarding the compared to the current. Pardon me. There's no changes in the new agreement compared to the old agreement relative to the topic of the existence of the Larchburg seat. And we clearly recognize that is the one remaining area of concern. So we don't want to not acknowledge that. So the board, we've brought this to you this evening for the ability for you to take a vote on it, but recognize that there are and have been substantial questions raised by board members in our past discussion on that remaining item. So the framing it for a vote is not meant to be presumptuous on staff's part. We just wanted to say, okay, if you get to that point, great. If you can't and you're just providing direction, you have flexibility to do that this evening as well. I mean, so we've brought it to you, you have that range of flexibility. I think those are all the key points from staff's perspective. We recognize it's not a perfect agreement, but a really, really substantial upgrade and improvement for to the long-term agreement. So no recommendation from staff. This is a purely policy and board elected official topic. And with that, I'll hand it back, and we can answer any questions that you have.
Let me start by saying this was a lot of work, and I'm really pleased with the results of it. You know, the board, this subcommittee worked well together. We got along. We didn't at any time address the Larkspur seat in the JPA subcommittee at all. It was not addressed. We did address it briefly at the Central Marin Sanitation District meeting last, which approved this amendment. And I want to have that conversation a little bit because Ken was there and I was there and you were there. Of course, Jason was there. I'm really going to put Jason on the spot here. I'll let us discuss this. My feelings set aside, I don't want to talk about feelings because they don't really play any role. The issue was brought up at the CMSA meeting at my request. Jason put it on the agenda, thank you. And the representative from San Rafael said that her position was that it was between Larkspur and this board. Whether she feels one way or another is not what she said on the record officially. It's filmed. I mean, those meetings are filmed, right? That's a provable fact is what she said, which is, it's really none of our business. I'm paraphrasing, but I think she might have actually said that. It's really between Larkspur and this Ross Valley Sanitary board.
Okay.
And so what I suggested in public at that meeting was that the Ross Valley Sanitary board, the Larkspur City Council, meet and discuss the seat. So I'm happy to reach out to them again. I've spoken to them privately in the past. I can tell you that my inclination is that Larkspur is not really tied to that seat. And by the way, I will say that the representative from San Rafael, in a private conversation with me earlier that day, did say, yeah, this is a historical anomaly, this seat. So everybody recognizes it's weird. I don't feel personally, the board may feel differently, that we need to hold this up. I don't. I think there's no reason for that. Larkspur can withdraw at any time, make a few changes, they approve it. You know, I don't want to be petulant. I don't need if it's between us and Larkspur, as the San Rafael representative indicated, and the Corte Madera representative did not disagree, then it's between us and Larkspur. So we and Larkspur need to have that conversation. I will say I am a little frustrated at the just absolute unwillingness to have this conversation. It's like we need to call this the Voldemort conversation because it's the conversation nobody wants to have. I have no idea because it just. So anyway, my view is that Larkspur and Ross Valley need to discuss this issue, but I don't think we need to hold this up tonight, and I would not be in favor of holding it up tonight on that issue. I don't think that would be in the best interest of anybody.
I personally strongly recommend that we approve this amendment.
Okay.
And I think it wouldn't help us in our discussions with Larkspur to, have a petty,
I agree.
Approach to this. I think it enhances our discussions with them. That we did approve it, and we go ahead. I think it's a great amount of work. We've discussed. There's very few JPA agencies that could come close to renegotiating their agreement. It's a rarity.
Yeah, it was done well. Jason did a great job. I really commend him.
Oh, yeah.
It was a group effort committee and with Greg and Doris and
The manager had input, and it was more efficient than you could expect. So, yeah, I strongly recommend that we approve this. And then we'll figure out what to do next.
Yeah?
Well, I want to thank you for taking leadership of that meeting and bringing up.
It didn't work too well.
You know, you did it. Nobody else in that room would ask that question of Hilmer. So I wanted to give you a lot of kudos for that. It was a tough meeting. You know, it was very, it wasn't quiet. It was too quiet. And I just wanted to thank you for that. And by the way, to recap, the Larkspur rep sat there with a frown and didn't speak.
No, you did not.
And you asked the question, it's like, you know, the grand jury and LabCorp saying, this seat's got to go. Nothing. So that's the sad news, is that it's a power play still. It's still a power play. And that's my perspective. And, you know, it could change, it could not change. So I'm not going to vote for this until that changes. I've been waiting 8 years, and I saw that before I ran for office. It's been a problem. There's been ongoing fighting, part of that. So I don't see why we need to go ahead. We could continue it another month. If you guys want to vote on it, I'll probably abstain. But that's one of the more important things on this whole thing. And if you've got these grand jury, I mean, come on, it's the grand jury. It's not like some little group of people saying, oh, it needs to go. And why would we just move it along? I mean, that's where I'm at, and I don't need to be a party pooper here, but, and I agree with you, it is between us and them, and that's where it came out of. And so,
Well,
I would really, not to give mixed messages, and I know you have worked very hard. You have really worked your butt off trying to bring these people together and agree, and maybe when they change, maybe when Hilmer's off there, I don't know what to say.
Well, let me address a couple of things on that. Thank you for saying that. First off, we have to agree, and again, this is a provable fact, that Dan was not put on there appropriately. I love Dan, and I'm not objecting to his presence there, but there's a procedure for putting Dan on, and it was not even remotely looked at. It was completely ignored. So we need to address that with Larkspur. I actually think we made huge progress, because Tom, I agree with what you're saying as to what people were thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you that I worked hard, and I spoke to a lot of people, individually, and we got San Rafael to agree that it's none of their business. And I think that's a sea change. I was thrilled with that. I was absolutely thrilled with that. And Court Madera did not disagree with that in any way. And I thought that was a sea change. So the documented record on film at that meeting is that San Rafael's position is none of their business. Nobody objected to that statement. It's between Larkspur and this board needs to discuss this with Larkspur and address this. But I don't object to you voting against it or abstaining.
Well, the rest of it I agree with. It's just like this one thing.
Yeah.
It's a big thing, really. It
I
really is.
and I agree that both LAFCO and the grand jury took it seriously and addressed it. And so what I want to do is I want to do what I suggested at that meeting, is I want to ask the Larkspur Town Council to meet us about that.
At a joint meeting?
Yeah.
That's
We
fabulous.
can go to their meeting, they come to ours.
That would be fabulous.
Mary?
Well, first of all, I actually read the CMSA package and thought Jason's memo on the whole history of it was very enlightening. I mean, something that I did not know previous to reading that memo.
I think none of us did.
Not only, we were supposed to have 3 seats. We were supposed to have Larkspur seat after, not consolidating them.
The original
What is the word?
agreement was
Annexing. After annexing Larkspur, after taking responsibility for their pipes, we were supposed to have that seat allocated to us.
Correct.
So in my mind, it's a a middle ground to say there is no Larkspur seat.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean.
That's right.
And I made that clear to, to some people prior to the CMSA meeting. I think that we've tried to talk to Larkspur, and I think frankly, I mean, the statement, why would we put this on our agenda, they don't really have any cause to. So I'm troubled because I do think that it should have been discussed in the subcommittee. I'm very surprised to hear that the subcommittee on amending the GPA did not discuss this issue.
Yep.
I mean,
That is a bummer.
did you think it was not an issue for discussion?
I certainly did.
Did we approve, though, in one of the sections, I guess there were 5 sections, did we approve the governing board section? We didn't?
Yeah, we did.
We probably shouldn't have, and that would be the
Yeah.
time for us to
Yeah,
say.
but it wasn't discussed, and
We didn't
I kept
do
thinking
that.
it was going to come up, and it never did, so
Yeah.
Jason was kind enough to put it on the last CMSA agenda at my request, and I'm very grateful he got that history. I did ask him to dig all those documents up and put them in that, and so they were enlightening. So that's why I'm saying,
Right.
Dan Hilmar, I love him, and I really do, I like him very much. I have a lot of respect for him, I also like him personally very much, but he has not been put on that CMSA board appropriately at all.
And I don't know historically whether Kathy Hartzell was there, did Ross Valley?
No, I think she was. She was.
on for so long.
Ross Valley's
No,
like
she
all
was,
under.
they did.
Well, you guys formed a committee, and Ross
Two and
Valley
two.
had,
I was
representative,
there. I
and
was one of the people.
Lawrenceburg
part of
had
that.
Kathy,
Yeah,
and it was a
me.
split vote.
Okay.
So under that provision in the amendment to the annexation agreement, the Lawrenceburg Council has ultimate authority.
I see.
But they have to notice it, and they have to accept applications, so assumedly, Larkspur should have had 10 applications from residents who wanted to do it, and didn't, yes, I'm sorry. Jason.
And
Yes,
Dan,
Tom.
and Dan Hilmer was appointed as her alternate back when Kathy was, so he's sitting on the CMSA board as an
I
alternate
just
right
saw
now.
that, I just looked up on you, on that agenda
Yes, they
and
don't
saw
have,
that
they
he's
don't have a
listed as an
representative, a
alternate.
primary representative, because
Okay.
Kathy's gone.
So Dan is listed as an
Well, so
alternate.
maybe that, you know, first of all, the first order of business is to approve this JPA.
Or not.
The next- Yeah, or not. And the next order of business is to, you know, and I don't even know if it's on the agenda here, but authorize a joint, you know, a joint meeting. And in fact, you can say the agreement requires that we have a meeting to employ.
Oh, that's true. Well, no, I'm sorry.
And in addition.
In addition
we can discuss.
Well, it's not only that. The amended agreement of 1995 requires the Larkspur representative to report to us twice a year, which has not been done in the last 82 meetings. So that's true too. What do you feel about approving this and moving on the lateral? I hate to use that phrase.
I think, this is our opportunity.
Yes.
I do not think anybody on the Larkspur Council is going to say to Dan Homer, sorry, you don't get to go to that meeting anymore. I think it is, you know, it is historically just something that the Larkspur City Council wants to have a hand in.
Well, so it's
And I think we
and
can,
Ross and
I think we can kiss it goodbye. I don't think they're going to invite us in to tell them why they should turn over some power. The point to do that, this is why, the way we can change this is in the JPA renewal process. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to vote against it, but this is the mechanism for change. It's not play nice here and then we'll be nice later on.
Yeah.
And I know it's going to make us look like we're Ross Valley, stick it in everybody's eye again. On the other hand, Jason's memo makes it clear Larkspur's been doing things the way Larkspur wanted to do them, not abiding by the agreement that was first made. I mean, I understand there was some political horse trading that allowed them to stay on, but that's not what shows up in the memo. So, you know, it's like saying, oh, just, you know, sign the whatever, sign the divorce papers, and then I'll give you, outside of this legal binding contract, what you want. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we'd be foolish to believe that they would do something nice because we go.
I kind of do too.
Okay.
And so I don't think then we should hold up this JPA. That I would find, that would.
Well, can I make a suggestion?
Well, wait, that would turn a lot of our sister agencies against us. I just think it would be a step backward for this board to be petty. And it is petty because
I
we really don't have any impact on anything here.
Right.
They don't.
Right.
And it's a 6-member board, by the way, which is kind of a bizarre number, but that's why we did it.
Right.
2-2-1-1 vote, and I don't think they've ever been a swing vote in anything.
I agree. I don't think it's that big a deal. But in terms of whether it should have been part of revising the JPA, I think absolutely it should have.
been. It
And
should
I
have
don't,
been
you know,
discussed, yeah.
wow, how did the subcommittee decide what it was going to discuss? Because that's the only thing in here that I really thought was important.
There's two suggestions I'd like to put out. One, we can, I'm afraid I'm missing the word postpone or what's the-
Continue.
continue this to the next meeting. The second thing we could do is we could pass this with a caveat that this board is officially sending a letter to Larkspur, the second one, requesting a meeting to discuss the Larkspur seat. Now, they're going to have to answer that.
Why?
Well, they can't.
I really don't.
Because they're in violation of the
I mean, the
agreement.
same way that Dan said, why, or whoever, Dan Short said, why would I put that on the agenda?
They have a contract to how to appoint their board member. And so I think we can write the letter, I'm of course very much in favor of passing this and writing a
I
letter
am too.
and saying, listen, we need, in accordance with the 1995 agreement, you have to follow the procedure for appointing the board member.
But at the same time-
In addition, we would like to discuss.
I guess if they haven't abided by, I mean, is it a binding contract, the agreement of 1995?
Oh, yeah, of course it is.
What is the date, what is the,
I mean, apparently the parties haven't been following.
exactly. I mean,
Obeying it.
what can we do to them? What are the damages? What's the remedy if they don't do what they're supposed to do?
Are we, I don't know the contract very well. Are we a party to the contract?
Yes.
Yeah, it's between Ross Valley and Larkspur.
Only.
And how,
Do you want the document?
and how they
Is this the
appoint.
one that was in the CMSA package?
Yes.
There was a memo about it,
Yes.
saying that it wasn't enforceable? Wasn't, did
No.
I misread
No,
that?
no, no. it
Oh,
wasn't-
no. The first one was apparently unenforceable.
Got it.
There were some arguments on CMSA board from San Rafael that said if the Ross Valley Sanitary District simply appoints the Larkspur seat, that is not in
Yeah,
agreement
that's
with
what
how
I-
they set up their board of directors, and that was in violation. That's why in 95, it was altered. The original one was in 93, February 2nd, or January 2nd, 1993, January 6th, 1993. The second one was in 95. That was the one that has been enforceable.
So if the parties don't enforce the contract and both parties like ignore it for 2 decades, it's a little harder to argue,
It's
hey,
not, it's not.
now
hold on.
we want to enforce
No,
it.
hold on. Let me interrupt you. I'm sorry. It's not been ignored. The previous representative from Larkspur was appointed through that process. It is only Dan Hilmer recently who has not been appointed to that process, and I've been making that point, and I made that point at CMSA, that this is not the appropriate. So right now, it's being done, and right now we're arguing, this has not been ignored for 20 years.
Although
Okay?
you would say he's just the alternate, right? He's not the formal
It
appointee.
doesn't matter. They needn't, that's not how
The-
the appointment works.
Does enforcing the agreement and having them go through the hoops give this board what it's looking for?
Not really, but it brings the conversation to the table.
But yeah, it gives us 2 reasons to talk to them. If we just say, gee, we want you to discuss your membership on the JPA, I don't think that is a
So
good
I-
approach.
I guess I'm kind of shocked why this wasn't discussed for the last, since it started, that this was like the big kahuna.
It's
It was
something
like
to honor to
the
them.
elephant in the room, how come it was not addressed? And
Well, yeah.
that's why they're digging in.
Why do we think? I think that they don't really trust us yet.
Well, but
That's
it.
Yeah.
Well, and I
I'm sorry,
was
can I
really
say,
shocked.
when it was brought up on the CMSA board, Pam, to answer your question, of course, the Joint Powers Subcommittee meeting is comprised of people who are on CMSA for the most part. Dan Hilmar, as was stated, we were there, said not one word, okay, not a word, didn't say a word. Carbondera representative said not one single solitary word. The San Rafael representative's comment was, okay, can we finish this discussion? What are we supposed to do here? Are we voting on something? We're not voting on something. It's just discussion. Okay, can we end the discussion? I'm moving into discussion. So why wasn't it discussed at the subcommittee? It was barely discussed when it was put on the agenda. So it's between Larkspur and us. And so that much we got on the record from them. So I feel
Have you talked to you've talked to the mayor?
I have. I spoke to the mayor.
This
and I
is
spoke
really
to
a
him.
function of.
He is the,
I spoke to the mayor when it was Kevin Harroff,
Mm-hmm.
and I spoke to the mayor when it was Dan Hilmar, and I'm telling you, I spoke to the other council members, and I'm telling you, I don't feel that there's a huge, I think they just don't want to talk about it. It's just the most
Well,
bizarre,
and I guess
weird, odd thing.
this is what I want to say. I mean, you're saying they don't trust us, but the point that the grand jury makes and the point that LAFCO makes is this is actually poor governance,
Yeah.
right? So because there are no people there, or except for Ross Valley representatives, and correct me if I'm wrong, who ever have to face voters about how much we are charging them, then CMSA's board can spend and spend and spend and spend, and our portion of it goes up and up and up and up, and then we have to talk to voters about it. So it's poor governance.
Yep.
Everybody who sits on the CMSA board, I think, should be in some way, indirectly or directly, responsible to ratepayers for sanitary services. And it's far afield of that. I mean, both because Corte Madera uses Roy Sewer Service, right? And San Rafael has like a It's in part of their, city government. It's different from us. And I'm not saying like this is the only way to do it, but it's much closer to the bone when the rate increases come in. And so I'm so pleased that you pour over the financials and come to Jason and say, is there another way that we can do this? Not spend whatever it was, the $11 million and such. Like, we take it really serious. And the current composition of the CMSA board, the year I sat on it, I felt like Mary Beth Bushy was like, can we get this over with? Can we get out of here? Not the way we deliberate about things. And believe me, I think we were way over on the other end for a while about how long we deliberated about things. But I just think that the good governance, and this is what Greg said to me, I didn't come up with this argument, the good governance argument is the one that needs to be made. It's not about whether we play nicely anymore. We play nicely, everybody knows. We just have much more directly responsible, we're responsible to our ratepayers, and they're not. I feel like it's a group of people who are politicos from across the county who want to come together once in a while, not people who are like poring over the details.
Mary Beth Bushy is on a Santa Fe Sound board, and Corinne Madera first is on the Sanitary 2 board, and she has to approve rates.
Okay.
And also, Mary Beth Bushy is also a Public Utilities Commission attorney, so she knows.
Not
this.
anymore.
Okay, she was, okay. But anyway, so where are we?
What does that have to do with her being on the PUC?
I just think that she's not unaware of public utilities. It's not like she's,
Okay.
yeah.
But I'll come back to the money thing, right? So we are very, very aware of what CMSA's rates do to our rates. Not only that, that it is our money going to them, but also that we are 50% of their budget, right? So when their rates go up, we are bearing a bigger burden of it than those smaller districts. So that's the way the JPA was set up, to make sure that the Ross Valley ratepayers had the seat at the table to determine how the CMSA was going to be run. And I think that's what we're asking for. And I thought this was the mechanism to change that. I honestly never thought we'd go back and reopen the JPA. 4 years ago, this seemed unthinkable. So then I thought that it was going to be an opportunity for that conversation. It's not a hill I'm going to die on, but and I wish we could work it out some other way, but I think we're absolutely fooling ourselves that people don't give up power. People
It's a
don't.
power play, totally.
What's the sense of the board?
I'd like to make a motion.
I'd like to put it out to the public,
I'm
and
sorry.
I'm not ready to vote.
Okay, so is there any public discussion? Yes, Steve.
Steve Key is Payfax. I was at the meeting. I'm new to all of this, and I don't quite understand the whole thing, but Roxbury's having a seat on that board doesn't make any sense to me. And it just seems like, and the arguments that now is the time to get it resolved should make sense to me.
Okay.
You guys are the ones who have the responsibility, the money, the taxes, the whole business.
And the other thing I would say is, I hope it wouldn't have to be like we're throwing a tantrum. I think we could say we brought it to our board, and our board was surprised to hear that this was not discussed. And so we wonder if we could discuss it. Continue it, because Michael's not here, and
That's true, Michael's not here.
and also, is there anything time sensitive, right? Like, does the CMSA doesn't shut down if we don't approve this GPA this month, right?
It isn't going to have any advantage for us to not approve this. It still involves a discussion, as you've been saying, with Larkspur. It doesn't really have anything to do with San Rafael.
No, it does not. No, officially it does not. They stated that for the record.
And
Of course.
there's no reason why Larkspur has no investment in us passing a new JPA either, right?
Yeah, well, they have to approve it on their board.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, if we were to say we're not willing to approve this JPA
I think
because
that's it.
we have not revised the membership, no, that wouldn't really hurt them in any way, shape, or form. Like, it is an offline negotiation at heart. Is that true? Is that what you think?
That's what I think.
In other words, if we approve this and Larkspur decides to leave the board,
That's 5 minutes.
it's Yeah,
There's a withdrawal
It's
provision.
about
Yeah, and the provisions fit.
33 words get changed.
That's right. Jason, how much challenge would that be after, to the entire JPA? You've got to change the number of board members.
If Larkspur decided we passed this, then in 2 months they decided to.
We'd add a whereas statement stating that, just to reflect their original, member of the JPA, they withdraw on this date. We'd take out their definition, and we'd take out, their name from the membership section and their board representation. It'd take, 4 minutes, exactly.
I mean, the irony is, I really thought when Kathy Herzl no longer wanted to be on the board that this wouldn't be an issue, but it seems that Dan Miller has taken on the sense that this is really important.
I have to tell you, talking to him privately about this after he was mayor, I didn't get that impression. I'm going to go back, I've said this too many times, but the absolute refusal to address this is the bizarro world. That I think if they got them all in the room, because I spoke to other members of Larkspur, and I didn't get the impression any of them really particularly thought of it. Maybe they do, maybe they will, but it is just the refusal to talk about it. I'm telling you, he's who shall not be named.
What's their game?
Right.
What's the game?
Well, you have to address, when two agencies, LAFCO and the grand jury, address it to you and point it out, and it's in public that, you shouldn't be on this board, and they're staying on. I think it doesn't make them look very, we're not the bad guys on this issue. I think they're the grand jury's saying get off, LAFCO's saying get off.
To the JPA, it was discussed and it was decided to stay with it. That's the end of it.
Now, Jason, would you describe that accurately as having said that? Is that an accurate statement?
I didn't hear what Sean said.
What I said was, if Larkspur has to respond to the, I don't even know if they do.
They did.
Okay, if they have to respond to the
Grand jury.
The consolidation.
It was discussed at Central Marin, and it was decided we stay.
Not the consolidation, the early, or is it LAFCO?
Well,
The
so
LAFCO?
just-
They did answer, they did respond to LAFCO, it was in that packet. They now need to respond to the Marin grand jury. You're saying, they'll say, it was discussed at JPA and it was decided we'd stay on.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's not an accurate statement. Jason, is that an accurate statement?
I don't think Larkspur has to respond to the consolidation report.
He does not. Is it an accurate statement?
But they don't have to respond to the,
Yeah.
they don't have to respond.
No, they do, don't they?
No, we
They're all
respond
listed.
for them because,
No. The grand jury report that just came out,
Yeah.
we look at,
They
they
respond
list
back.
the respondents, and I actually spoke to the grand jury foreman about this after reviewing the report, had a couple other questions. Because I said, one of your recommendations is that for the JPA to make this application, I said, you listed the other members as respondents, but you have left off the city of Larkspur, who is listed as a member. I just want to point that out. Was that intentional or was that an accident? And he, in essence, said it was kind of an oversight. I don't think Larkspur is on the radar screen, but I don't want to speak for the grand jury. I think that was my reading of what the person said. But to be clear, I think what Jason's saying is correct. The city of Larkspur right now is not listed as a respondent on the new grand jury requirement. I will point out, just for the board's awareness, and you kind of talked about, kind of how come this wasn't really openly addressed at the ad hoc committee.
People said it was going to.
Right,
Senator
exactly.
Bell said it
So
was
the
going to,
responses to the LAFCO MSR, which made that recommendation,
Yeah.
City of Larkspur's, Corte Madero's response was, this will be handled through the ad hoc committee.
Yeah.
And Senator Feld-Sand District's comment was essentially the same. We expect this.
I made that point at the Central Marin Sanitation
Right,
meeting
right.
last.
So I think.
And Larkspur said, why doesn't CMSA
Tell us what to do.
make some recommendations?
Right, so
And
everyone's
that's what I tried
sort
to
of
do with
passed on.
CMSA.
Right, but what I'm saying, now I want to ask Jason again. You just said that Larkspur might respond, that it was addressed at the JPA and it was agreed we'd stay on. I'm saying that's not an accurate statement. They can say that, but it's not truthful. Did anybody at JPA agree that they'd stay on? It
They're
wasn't
not
addressed.
even going to respond.
What,
wasn't
it
addressed
doesn't,
At
they
the
don't,
JPA ad hoc committee meeting?
The ad hoc committee was not
It was
addressed.
addressed.
Well, it was a section on membership, it was in one of the groupings, and the managers didn't touch that section. And my recollection, and I look back on my notes, I didn't take notes on it because there wasn't any revisions to it. My recollection was, it was discussed briefly as part of one of the many provisions during that meeting. And they just said leave it alone.
Okay, so you mentioned that to me when I spoke to you, you said maybe 2 sentences, and I said, was I in the room? Because I assure you, I wasn't in the room.
It may not have been, I don't remember that.
It's never
Okay,
discussed.
this is the last thing I'm gonna say. It's because Greg made reference to it and I was just finding it. So Sandra Fell-San said in response to recommendation number 4, that CMSA should reorganize its governing board to limit and/or remove the city of Larkspur's presence. CMSA and its JPA member agencies are currently reviewing the JPA, which includes the CMSA governing board structure. The city of Larkspur's presence will be addressed through this review process. And then SAN 2 says revision of the JPA agreement should address this. Perhaps it makes sense for the JPA ad hoc and district manager working group to discuss and make a decision on this. So, I mean, I don't think it was substantially discussed.
It wasn't
To
discussed.
say, leave it alone,
It wasn't
that is
discussed.
not discussed.
It wasn't
So, I mean, I think that's
So,
a good
I
starting
wanna be
place.
very
And I'd be
clear.
happy to go to a
I'd be
Larkspur
very
City
clear.
Council meeting and read that.
And I said that to Jason, if there was 2 sentences in the 2 years we did, I was not in the room.
Right.
And since it's clearly between Ross Valley Sanitary District and Larkspur, it's inconceivable that it should have been a 2-sentence, that was your words, maybe 2 sentences, discussion when I wasn't in the room. I'm telling you, I went to all those meetings, I was late to one meeting, maybe they were like, Doug's late, that's quickly. That's all I know is it
The
wasn't discussed.
will isn't there. The will isn't there to discuss it openly. I mean, just hearing the way the CMSA meeting was described and Pam thanking Tom for speaking up and Dan Hilmer saying nothing during the entire thing, the will is not there. So I will just say again, I think it should have been addressed in this process and I'm very surprised to hear that it wasn't.
So what if you came back and just had a meeting for this and get everything out on the table?
I think we had that at the.
I'm just saying it's
No.
poor,
Can I-
it's poor governance to get these messages from the grand jury and LAFCO of the process, and it didn't happen.
I'd
Let
like
me
to
just
address that
finish,
question.
Doug.
I was,
Doug, let me just
Yeah.
talk, okay? And so I'm thinking to be really clear about what did happen and what didn't happen. I think you should just make one more effort. That's where I'm at. That way, I mean, I can't vote for this because it shows poor governance. I'm sorry. These were ad hoc committee meetings. They were not open meetings. So whatever happened, happened, but now the cat's out of the bag.
They are open meetings, aren't they? They're open meetings.
They're ad hoc.
They're not noticed.
Those were not meetings to the public.
But there's no minutes.
But that section that had the membership, that went back to every board.
Okay,
For discussion at
I'm
open
just
meeting.
saying, we're here today,
Right.
and I'm really sorry that it happened that way, but I'm wondering, all the work that's been done, maybe we should just make one last stab, and then I would feel more comfortable moving on. But at this point, I just don't.
let me address why I don't agree with that, and I'll tell you why. I'm telling you, I felt it was a sea change to get San Rafael to say, on the record, it's none of our business, and our position is, we don't care, it's between you. That was a sea change, that's on the record. We can't do better than that. If we have another meeting and we bring in San Rafael, it's not gonna get better than that, it's gonna get worse than that.
I mean the ad hoc committee.
That is the ad hoc
No,
committee.
it's the same people.
It's the same people. So the only person on the ad hoc committee that isn't on the CMSA was me. And I feel I got San Rafael and Corte Madera over the line I wanted, which is it's none of our business. Thank you very much, great, I appreciate it. Because before that, it wasn't none of their business, it was all their business. And they wanted them on, and I think that was to dilute our votes, and I don't really, there's a history of this board. This board wasn't very good a number of years ago. That was an historical anomaly.
So you're clear, you want to.
I don't want to go back through CMSA. I think we've gotten them exactly the best position we can get
I
them
don't
in.
want to
So
go
you're-
back to the CMSA either.
Yeah.
It's
I
not
want to
gonna
be
get us
clear
anywhere.
then, so you feel comfortable moving ahead, keeping this language in here, talking about this seat. Even though the community and you have these very powerful agencies over us telling us that this is not correct, but you still feel comfortable about voting in it.
Well, I want to,
I just want to be really clear when we vote.
I want to be very clear with Larkspur that we need to address this. But how about this? When I make a motion.
I feel like we've been completely clear. I mean, for a while, you said you were gonna be able to talk to Dan Hilmer, and it was gonna happen.
Yeah.
Michael Borstein told me he was gonna be able to talk to Dan Hilmer, and it was gonna happen. I actually don't, I think that, that is not a true statement. I actually think that's kind of the strategy, unfortunately. So,
What do you want to do? You said I got an idea, what about?
My idea was to continue it. Or my idea was to not continue it, to pass this, but also pass an agreement that this board will write a letter to the Larkspur Town Council requesting a joint meeting to discuss the seat.
That's what I want to do. I don't want to continue this. I think it's,
Okay, but if
we won't get anywhere with it. I want to.
if we vote on it, then it's a done deal.
But
It's a done deal.
doing a kind of a penny delay is exactly the way it's going to be perceived by every CMSA member. I think what we do is we approve this, but we write a letter to Larkspur. And we request I would like to put those two things on the letter. According to our contract, we get to look over your.
No, we get to redo it, and it's got to be publicly noticed, which it wasn't. It's never publicly noticed.
And two, we want
So
to
they take
discuss the
applications.
need for, we would be going to the joint meeting.
and I will say, I don't wanna, I do not want to be seen as a difficult sanitary district again. And I think, there's a lot in this JPA that is great and better and moving in the right direction. And now that people are able to talk, and it is also infinitely modifiable. So I would go along with passing the JPA as it's presented to us tonight. And I take the criticism that we reviewed it previously. And this board had a conversation about what about the Larkspur seat. Before I move more of the detailed history that came out because you asked to put it on the agenda and Jason wrote this, incredibly enlightening memo. So I feel like as a whole, people aren't afraid of, figuring out the facts and knowing the truth about this. So I would propose that we, pass this JPA and then say, we're gonna start pointing what these districts said to the grand jury out to them and to the grand jury and say, this didn't happen. We can always open back up the JPA, but this didn't happen in this round. And it didn't even get meaningfully discussed, and we are disappointed in that.
So, Andrea, do we, by law, we could just take out the seat, right, in the JPA if we wanted to?
If all of the members of the JPA agree, just like.
But I mean,
just like
if we wanted to, we could do that.
No.
We
Not
solely, no.
No.
But
I mean, you
our
could
agency.
approve
our
something with it
agency-
removed, but that doesn't mean
Right,
everybody
but
else.
our agency could take that out. And the only way to take out the Larkspur seat.
Well, I still don't understand what your question is. If we voted tonight to approve it without that paragraph,
Yes.
it would be meaningless unless everybody else approved the same thing.
Right, and it would never pass then.
Right.
Right, okay, so this is your opportunity to make a change.
One of the comments I had for the board's consideration, and for what it's worth from general manager's perspective and all the history and working with the other managers to develop it. And as Jason mentioned, we weren't, at the manager's level, we weren't unaware, we sort of purposely didn't push it as a topic. I mean, I think was our thinking because we clearly saw it, as a hot button issue that clearly belonged with the electeds, which is why the general managers, that was a discretionary call, maybe it wasn't the right one, but we felt, okay, we shouldn't make a recommendation, we shouldn't show a red line or something that emphasizes that change. Having said that, two things. My professional, for what it's worth, recommendation on this topic, which I know is purely with the board, I only offer it kind of in recognition of the circumstances, that you, Tom, the points about the perception are they very important, and you say, okay, what can't this agency and the other agencies continue to constructively do with this in place that it doesn't stop things, but also that I think more importantly, and you know these folks better, but remember right now that as you point out, Doug, and I haven't seen enough of those movies to know the names, but no one wants to talk about it within the JPA governing board. But I think there's at least a chance that when the common person link here is Dan Helmer, who's on the city council and appropriately at the moment on the board. If you're having this conversation with the 5 members of the Larkspur City Council, it's potentially at least potentially a different dynamic, because you're not sitting with 5 people who have all of the background and investment that the current JPA board members have. And I think that at least opens the opportunity for some fresh thinking and perspective on this. Dan is going with the institutional memory and history on this for sure, but the other 4 members of the Larkspur City Council, I think, from my understanding, really, this is something they very seldom hear a whole lot about. So you have a natural opening to engage them with the need to follow the agreement to update the appointment, and you use that as an opening for the agreement, for the discussion with really 4 out of 5 essentially fresh voices in the room. And that at least gives you an opportunity to see if you can get consensus with the Larkspur Council, because I think what we all agree on is that, practically speaking, this is an issue between Larkspur City Council and the Ross Valley Board. And if there's a political and compromise or resolution to be reached, it's most likely to be reached in that form.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the JPA form. I think we've seen that people are going to talk past each other on it. So that's my 2 cents to the board.
I can make a motion.
Yes.
I propose that we approve the JPA agreement as it's written, and that we contact the Larkspur City Council for further negotiations and discussion on their representation of the JPA.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
I want for the record, I'm opposing it based on the grand jury report on LAFCO's report, is why I was.
What about abstaining?
No, I think that's no.
No, I'm not. I think that's what we're doing. I've been waiting years for this thing to change, and I'm just.
Okay, so that issue is closed.
Correct.
Jason, thank you for
I'll stick around for the next one too. And you get some signatures at the end of the meeting.
You need some signatures? Yeah. I'll give you your signature now. If you
Oh, look at this, and I signed our letter. That gives me even extra cause to go around and show.
Oh, I'm sorry. Marin. Doug Kelly.
Yeah, I'm doing there.
I didn't agree with that.
She knows it's always Douglas T. Kelly when I'm signing. Oh, I can't sign this, I'm sorry. See, I can do it.
We've all had at least this much discussion.
Did you ever think I'd be the feistiest person on the board? I'm channeling Frank. Thank you, that's.
At least I got top billing, I'll give you that. Yes.
Thank you,
All
everybody.
right, thank you, Jason.
Okay.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, and I appreciate the long discussion and the enthusiasm and the interest in good governance and doing the right thing. I really do appreciate that very, very much. The next issue is consideration and direction on response to the Marin Civil Grand Jury Report Consolidation of Sanitary Districts. That is issue number 12. As you know, the grand jury sent us a report, but let's have a staff report.
Okay, just very brief. The staff report notes that there are 2, you guys are familiar with the recommendations of the grand jury. It's a perennial topic in Marin County. It's not a new one. They've offered an updated view on the same topic that's been looked at, seriously in Marin County for a number of years. But to get to the focus of the matter, they have 2 recommendations that require responses from the Ross Valley Sanitary District. The first one actually is pretty straightforward, and that is that there should be movement forward working with LAFCO to complete the annexation. They use the term reorganization, either one, whichever is appropriate. Annexation of Murray Park Sewer Maintenance District and the San Quentin Sewer Maintenance District. And that's a very uncontroversial, I would say. That's one that was widely acknowledged and agreed to. It was also addressed in the 2016 Municipal Services Review by LAFCO. We've had extensive conversations about this with the county in the past. In fact, we elected to wait until after the NSR to revisit this because we felt that the NSR would provide objective backing for the public's understanding of why the annexation process was going forward. Here we are in 2018. We now have the LAFCO NSR making that very recommendation. At this point, you now have the grand jury making the same recommendation. So those are some good backings. And it really, this simply hasn't happened in the past because of some poor politics going back, a number of years. But based on our discussions about 2 years ago with district staff, with county staff and with staff from Supervisor Rice's office, there was no one questioning the reasonableness of this one. So this is just a matter of logistics, and just so the board is aware, on a quick note on LAFCO, LAFCO's remaining full-time staff person, I believe, is Rachel Jones, and she is departing LAFCO in the first week of June. So it's not clear to us what capacity LAFCO has at the moment to organize and do these things, but that's sort of a logistical matter to keep in mind. On the second recommendation, which is what we've is really dealing more with the JPA members, it's a recommendation that essentially the JPA members collectively submit an application to LAFCO by September to effect a reorganization. Essentially the essence of staff's recommendation on this is that the recommendation is really not a practical one. If you look at what's involved in a complete and actionable application for reorganization of agencies of this scale, it's a tremendous amount of work and topics that have to be covered and analyzed and brought in an organized manner to the LAFCO. And from prior conversations with the two former executive directors of LAFCO, Peter Banning and Keen Simons, who are no longer there, but we had this conversation in the past for different reasons, and they both made it clear that LAFCO looks to the applicants to have already reached consensus and developed a sufficiently detailed plan, and then bring that to LAFCO, and then LAFCO helps you essentially finalize it and looks for, it has a standard checklist of concerns they go through. But the main point there is you've got to have already have reached formal consensus among the member agencies, and you have to have gone through a long list of practical topics that you're going to figure out how you're actually going to conduct the consolidation. So in essence, the recommendation, and this is not meant to be a slight on the work of the grand jury in any way, but I think it doesn't reflect the reality of what's involved in the recommendation. So staff would recommend that first of all, that you work with the other member agencies that are listed in the recommendation so that an ad hoc committee or something similar can help formulate a consistent and sort of unified response to the recommendation. That could be done between now and the July deadline for responses. Alternatively, the district could just respond unilaterally and essentially say you disagree with the recommendation and for these reasons. No action is required tonight except direction to staff, and right now that would be okay. We could formulate a response letter for your consideration at the June meeting. It would agree with recommendation number 1, it would disagree with recommendation number 2, and cite some of the factors for that. That's really about it. You've got attachments, you've got the entire grand jury report, and also just to illustrate the point about the complexity and level of work in an annexation application, there's an attachment C, which is a list of activities that Jason at CMSA had compiled, back in 2005-06, when there was an organized and cooperative effort between the agencies to begin this process. And what that does, I think, very clearly is illustrates the magnitude and relative complexity of the information that has to be considered by the respective bodies and consensus reached on what it looks like in the future. So this is no small feat. You're looking at a couple of years worth of work in this case at a minimum once you have consensus and direction, I think, at a political level. So that's kind of staff's recommendation on the topic, and I'll hand it back to the board.
Tom?
Well, what I think we ought to do is start writing a letter to the injury. And my approach would be that, recommendation one, we should complete the reorganization of Marin Park and San Quentin Prison. I think we should say, we would propose this in a two-step process, and it would immediately apply to
Not San Quentin Prison, San Quentin Village.
sewer maintenance. The sewer maintenance.
CMSA
Same as
has
down in
San
Marin.
That we proceed rapidly with Marin Park, because we're already, operating our sewers and et cetera, et cetera. And that the village is more complicated because it has a contract. That would be the second phase of this. It's more complicated as a contract. That would be my response is, let's go, we'll go after Murray Park and try and get consensus with the county. And we won't have throw up too many roadblocks and try to do it. And San Quentin down the follow, that's got other complications. And then I think we ought to say for two.
Wait a minute, can we take one at a time?
Sure.
All right, your thoughts on one, Pam?
I think it's a good idea, Tom. It shows that we're making an effort, and this has been in the works for a long time. But I think you're right, that keep it simple, and that way we'll get something done. And it'll at least let the community know that we're serious about moving ahead. Yeah.
Pam, I'm going to go, Mary.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to think, it was like one of the first meetings Greg and I went to after he got hired. We went and sat down with Katie Rice, and she was like, can't we do something about Murray Park? And I don't know what the barriers are, but for all the other things he's gotten done since he's been here, this one must be really.
One barrier I can tell you is that they pay
Nothing.
less than half of what our rate is.
About 450.
Right, and the county subsidizes it.
Yeah, so that has to be worked out. It has to be worked
I
out.
think we should approach this, listen, they should be run by our agency with our staff and maintaining their sewers and repairs, et cetera. And that, this would be part of the final agreement, but I say we take them on.
Yeah.
And we take the gut for raising their rates back to what they should be, because the county's not gonna do it. But anyway,
Well, wait,
we don't know that.
Let's be clear that when we're talking about the rates, I want to make them not the anomaly. They need to be paying the same rates as all the other Ross Valley Sanitary ratepayers except Larkspur. And they need to have an ad valorem, just like everybody else. Just like everybody else. In fact, someday we're going to bring Larkspur to the ad valorem and make them like, I know, that's going to be fun. But we're going to work the math out. This time, in the next 5-year plan, we're working the math
Is Murray Park
out.
in the same situation as the county subsidizing
Yes.
Murray Park also?
Yes, San Quentin Village and Murray Park, they both pay about
A little
$4.
bit. Now, Murray Park pays, I'm pretty sure it's
About $20.
$150, equivalent to one unit, just like us, but they get a property tax. And so we'll discuss the details of the annexation.
But I agree with your take on section 1. The only thing is, I think the date was a problem. Get this all done by September or something.
Well, and
No,
we'll
that's-
decide.
this is the act.
Well, of course, and we'll say.
There's no date.
We will proceed
As we can.
as situation.
Yeah, fine.
But we're willing to start. Right?
I agree with that. So number 2.
Number
Wait,
two.
I have a question for Greg. With this kind of annexation, wouldn't there have to be a pre-inspection of pipes?
We've already done
What we're
that.
getting,
Yeah,
what
that's
we're
just,
doing?
so Murray Park, essentially, as Thomas mentioned, it's virtually part of our system today, except on paper.
Okay, so we know what we got.
Yeah, we've
Okay, that's
inspected,
all.
we actually did point repairs under contract.
Okay.
We know
And
everything
San
about that
Quentin
part.
too? San Quentin Village?
Not San Quentin, we have not been
Boy,
involved.
that's
So our
salt.
San Quentin's a different unit count.
Yeah.
So that's why it's a two-step process.
All right. So that's
And I
number 1.
don't want to get involved in the development of the prison.
Yeah,
That kind of discussion get brought into this thing.
we should turn that.
I never
was so
said
That's
anything.
another
I
thing.
didn't say anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Number two,
Yep.
I think that we use Jason's list of all those tasks that we mentioned. We're prepared to begin solving these tasks, and we can explain, by the way, LAFCO's process. I guess you would have to explain that they want us to be completed. We'll begin, the timing is inconsistent. we recommend we start with various, like a uniform sewer lateral ordinance. And uniform discussions of the job
Rates.
descriptions.
Yep.
That's key.
Yeah.
And, you know, things like that, things that, sharing major equipment, just have a list and just
Well,
check them
can I
off.
suggest that the first sentence says something to the effect of, yes, we agree in general with this.
Yes, we agree.
The details to be, the details are the details, but I absolutely agree that we should consolidate and save taxpayer money every way we can, any way we can, as long as it makes sense to the ratepayers. In other words, if, I'm not saying this is true, if Corte Madera, if their pipes were 300 years old and nobody did any work on them, we're not just going to merge with them and not have that change. So obviously the pipe inspections and the rates and the laterals.
And the unions.
Yeah, and the unions, and we have a number of full-time employees at San Rafael. It's not quite as big as us, but they have a lot less because they pull out of their public works people. So they have,
They might have two.
I think they have 8 full-time dedicated, and then they have a lot more they pull from public works. Do you think that's about right, Steve?
Yes.
8?
Yes.
And Corte Madera has,
They use town employees for something.
they don't have any. I don't
No.
think.
Yeah.
They use, don't you do Corte Madera really?
No, you do the pump station.
Pump stations enforcement.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's another thing. We could do our pump stations, you know, jointly. In other words, the devil's in the details on consolidation, and we would work, you know, vigorously to solve the details of all of these list of things. And yes, we agree.
Yeah,
Consolidate.
I agree.
And what your
Boy, it's
schedule
not
is
changed.
unrealistic.
The schedule's completely
I
ridiculous.
used to call it the consolidator.
Um,
And it
In
wasn't a
my opinion, the
compliment.
savings would be in consolidating these items.
Yeah,
Really believe, that's where the savings is. And an upgraded facilities, and I think the other agencies would face it.
well, I think, that may be. I think the software, you know, if we have great software and Corte Madera has none, or, you know,
Oh,
so
that's
there's,
right.
you know,
CMS.
and our training programs are now superior to everyone else's, so they would benefit from our training programs. Not CSA, of course,
Our
they're
pension
fantastic.
documentation.
Beyond reproach.
Anyway.
And anybody else is
No,
doing it,
I
right?
think we
You know,
give a
years
positive
ago-
response and say, but here's what's practical.
I was gonna cut it.
I want to drag a skeleton out of the closet for a moment. There was a big to-do about the pensions. Remember the pensions?
Pensions.
And we actually sent a letter, I was on the board when I first got here. We sent a letter to San Rafael inviting them to consolidation. We got a letter back, I can probably find it. They didn't want nothing to do with us. So I don't think that's the case now, but it had a lot to do, the pensions were terrible, but I think that has improved. So I'm sure that would all iron out, right, in the application.
Okay.
Well, that's another, I mean, that's just one more good example, Pam, of a
But I
very
mean, it's-
complicated topic that
Right.
has, that would
It's
take,
one thing, right?
it's just one of
Yeah,
many.
So I
this,
don't-
this timeline's ridiculous.
Right,
Yeah.
and so,
And the degree of difficulty
Yeah.
is way up there.
But in general, don't we support the idea of consolidation?
We do, and
Do you?
I think we support. the-
well, I have a thing about local control. We can have a conversation somewhere else, but a special district is about local control, and that's
Well,
what
it
we
would be a
are.
special district.
And I don't mind consolidation if it's done well, and you need to do probably another study,
Mhm.
financial study.
Oh, yeah, oh, no question about it. Oh, I couldn't agree with more.
And there's just all these, you know, bringing together, but sometimes consolidations are terrible, it just depends.
I don't think this story is a financial study. I think that's way down at the end. After all of these, we'll do a financial study and somebody will say, oh gee, we can get rid of the manager, we can eliminate the attorney, et cetera, the CPA. What about the whole layer of staff that we're going to add for a much bigger agency? And is bigger, more efficient? We get the efficiencies with completing these tasks where we can share things better.
Well, I think we
And
started that
then
way.
we do.
Well, agreed. That's where we start. Well, we absolutely, shared services is absolutely the way to start. Absolutely. And besides, I don't.
Uniform service.
Yeah, and this is how Ross Valley Fire did. And now, with the injury of the Ross Valley Fire Chief, the old Fire Chief, Meager, came back temporarily, and now they're sharing their chief with the county fire chief. So the county fire chief is going to be the fire chief of Ross Valley Sanitary, Ross Valley Fire, and that's an additional sharing. Central Marin's.
The fire situation is entirely different than wastewater. Because the fire, basically Marin County Fire is one giant sharing fire district. If there's a fire in San Rafael, then
Yeah, but they all have different contracts and different pensions and different salaries.
they do that.
It is,
But
it's complicated.
They probably have their services very similar.
Mhm.
And they all have joint agreements already to do things.
And well, okay, so there's also Central Marin Police, which was, first off, the first ever consolidation of the police department in the state of California was Larkspur and Corte Madera. The second one was Twin Cities, which is with them, and San Anselmo. And now, then, subsequent to that, San Anselmo consolidated their dispatch services with the College of Marin, took them over, and then merged the Central Marin Central Marin Police Department's dispatch merged with the sheriff, and they all went to the sheriff's department. So the sheriff. So these are shared services.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is to start with shared services, and we're. Anyway.
May I say something?
Please.
So I'm forgetting what the terminology is, but we agree, disagree, or is there something in between? Concur, is that the word?
I
Anyway,
think you either, I believe it's a pretty much agree or disagree, and then you just need to.
But we have
state.
I mean, so I would say like, we could agree with qualifications, right? So I think it's an excellent idea to begin like very positively, like we agree with a qualified agreement that we can't get this done by September 30th. And here's why, and I think we talk about, the shared services that we have already, you talk about functional consolidation, if we're already working well collaboratively, if we're already loaning vac trucks or whatever, we're already, so just kind of like tout our efforts in this direction already, and then pull out the 109 or 29 line spreadsheet and say, this is what it would really take. But that we, in theory, in spirit, that's where we're going anyway.
Okay.
Does that?
So sort of a qualified.
No, I have a real point, we agree.
And I don't know if it's qualified disagreement or agreement.
No, I think Tom just said, we agree, but here's our approach.
Correct, and I think, you have a lot of editorial room in a sense to put into your response. I mean, they're looking for certain things, of course, but the functional consolidation focus that you've alluded to is one that, we come back to many times in the past on this, and the benefit of it is twofold or several. It's stuff that we really are already starting to do and have been doing, whether it's like the, the pump station contract services between the CMSA and Corte Madera. You have, we're moving, we just recently completed a pretty significant condition assessment and inspections effort for all of our shared, the common joint facilities, the force mains. You have fleet resource sharing opportunities. You have standardization of lateral standards and ordinances, which we know right there is a huge step that we've been talking about for a number of years and haven't been able to move forward.
Or we do skate it.
Right, and as you pointed out, Tom, that's, people want to sort of leap to the end about, well, we're gonna, they're gonna get rid of this, and this up here. But the reality is that these are functioning utility organizations that they don't run without all these other underlying building blocks of fleet management and of operations and of communications and so forth. So if over a course of years you're integrating and improving the efficiency of those shared services, you're actually moving where by policy or public policy goal you're saying you want to go, but you're doing it without tripping the third wire right away and jumping into the hard stuff. So it's really and as you guys, I think, and you know more about this, but I think that is in essence the path that successful consolidations in the Marin area have followed. So recognize that and don't try to jump to the, kind of what you see as the end point right away, but get there through these functional consolidation activities.
And I mean, one thing I will say is that doing this counteracts what Dick Spotswood said about us, which is we don't want to give up our seats on this board, right? Because I took offense at that, and then also I would want the other point that's important to be made, particularly in the time we were going through a transition with our general manager, is that the staff, we always will need the staff in a consolidation if it were to happen in the distant future. it's probably the management that would be streamlined,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
You're not, that's funny, you're management, I'm sorry, Steve. Anyway, you know, I just wouldn't want our weighing in on consolidation to spread like
Right.
anxiety or to reduce morale
Oh,
in the
that's
staff.
true.
I'd like to address that because I made that point when I was talking about the consolidation of the San Anselmo Police Department with Twin Cities. It provides a much better opportunity for the employees. There's more positions, there's more opportunity for an advancement. There's also more collegiate, I gave the example of you know, my son, who was my nephew at the time, was kidnapped in New York. And it was the police officer from the town next door that just had a kidnapping. And he stepped in and said, I really know about this. And he took control, and a year and a half later got the child back. The whole idea of people talking to each other, you know how to fix you're doing how many pipe fixes a day? 6?
Anywhere from 2 to 7.
Right, so this is a skill that we're good at. Maybe another department's good at something else. I think for the employees, it's a win-win-win-win. I don't think it's a lose for anybody. I think it's great.
And maybe we ought to say, you know, and provide protection for employees. I think.
Yeah.
You didn't mention Fairfax.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Jason, what are your thoughts? Do you want to give us any thoughts?
So maybe,
Do you want to remain silent?
a draft letter.
Just pay attention.
We'll bring a draft letter in June.
Do we have any public comment?
No.
Okay, do you have direction?
Yes, yes.
What do you think, Jason?
He's
I just don't want to be open to the manager's secretary off.
Demur.
That you're talking about.
Okay. Number 13, and thank you for the patience. Consideration of proposal for executive recruitment services for district general manager. Our outgoing general manager could give us a staff report.
Defer to
Mary? Andrea?
council.
Can I start, or do you want to?
No, you can. I
Okay.
think it's
I mean, yeah,
straightforward.
it's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Per the staff report, we have 4 proposals for services associated with recruiting a new general manager. You have all 4, and I believe there are 2 of the entities that are.
I know that CPS is here. And what's your name?
I'm Teresa.
I'm Richard with Cobb.
And you're both, oh, okay, so you're
Richard.
Richard Woodcock.
No, sorry, Richard O'Donnell.
Oh, Woodcock, okay, so there's Richard, okay. There's Richard.
Oh, okay, you're with Cobb Associates,
Yes, Cobb is it.
and you're with CPS. Very good, okay.
So really, you have a number of options on how to move forward. Staff, we just tried to put in a couple of options related to, you can either make a decision, or you can make a decision to interview all or a subset of the proposals for you, in which case, you know, staff could be directed to identify a time and place for that, and including whether it be a subset or the entire board that is doing it. So really, it's up to you at this point how to move forward.
I don't think anybody had a feeling that we should have a subset at all. So I think this should all be done in front of the board at open meetings, at open time, and the entire board should be involved in this. I think that's been clear.
Should we have interviews?
On these,
Yeah.
I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Let them give 3 to 5 minutes. Talk
Well,
about
I
it.
think the people who are here should get 3 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll
sure.
tell you that right now.
Yeah, but I don't think we can interview.
All right, so why don't we do that? Why don't we invite Teresa, who's came earlier?
Has experience at home.
She figured out,
Is it fair
have
that
dinner
one
till-
of you leave? Yeah, I think maybe it might be fair.
It's a public meeting, you can watch it later on TV.
Oh, okay, they can watch it later, but I think it's,
Okay.
you know, the first one, it might be more fair.
Okay.
So what are we going to say?
That's what we're asking you to do. You can sit right in there.
You don't have to, you don't have, definitely don't.
So it's a nice seat, it's warm, it's dry, and it's quiet, right inside that, you're right.
And you don't have to,
I
Richard.
don't know.
But
No, it's okay.
No,
No, wait,
I
our lawyer's
Go ahead,
not
go ahead.
comfortable.
I don't like asking one of them to leave, it's a public meeting. I feel like,
Okay.
you're doing all this in public. Keep-
I don't mind that, yeah.
No, wait, that's our attorney's advice.
Yeah.
We now have attorney advice saying
Sure.
she's not comfortable.
I just don't like the board asking somebody to leave a public meeting when they're
Okay,
not.
that's,
even if it's not like,
It's kind of a
Demand.
professional.
that's fine. It's
Yeah.
up to them, it's up to them how they want to.
Oh, I don't mind.
Okay.
Not at all.
So come on up and tell us.
Well, you have our proposal. I'll just tell you very briefly about CPS. We're also a JPA, which is kind of interesting, so it's interesting just to hear how.
Does Larkspur have a seat on there?
So we are a public agency. We can only work with other public agencies. That is a little bit different from the normal. You have a proposal. Processes are probably very similar to most of the agencies. And really, I'm here to ask you if you have any questions about the proposal or the process in particular. More than that, I believe, I don't know if you shared with them, Andrea reached out to us because we just finished, well, hopefully we finished, 2 more days, hopefully we'll finish a similar district, a special district down in the San Juan Key area for an executive director. But we've done several.
What type of district was that? Was it a?
It's a flood control district. But
Who
we've
are
done lots of.
you in JPA with?
They're all public agencies, City of Anaheim, City of Las Vegas, which makes for really fun board meetings. Not for me, but for others. I have not looked in a long time, and we just recently added some. There's Mecklenburg County, back east. And yes,
Charlotte,
we're
Mecklenburg?
nationwide.
So you do all their work for members of the JPA?
We don't do all their work, but we have worked for several board members. The City of Anaheim has used our services before, for example. East Bay Mud. So there's several more, and I am drawing a blank, so I apologize.
So this reference list in here is not up to date? Because you don't have East Bay Mud on here.
Oh, no, we haven't worked for East Bay Mud for a while. That one is more up to date.
Do you have any from the Bay Area?
I can look and see if you would request that.
It's, okay. And how, and wastewater?
I can check. We have 4 recruiters, so I don't even know what they're looking at. But I can just send that.
Casinos down in Ventura County.
Is Monterey one on?
Yes.
Monterey 1 is here.
Yeah. we've done a lot of work
Casitas
with them.
Municipal Water District, Monterey 1, South Coast Air Quality Management District, Hidden Valley Lake Community Services District. That's
Yeah,
all.
I can send a list of these.
And you have a 2-year guarantee.
We do. We do.
And 3 of you would be working on a project, do you think?
No, we include that because we don't, depending on when you get started, and we try to get the workload that can best fit, depending on when you want to start. So it would be one of those 3. And I'm
Or one of those 3?
Yes.
And would you be on it for sure?
Did either of you recruit him for his current new job?
No, but I've been taking
No,
that
they did.
seriously.
Because we wouldn't like that.
No, so it would be one of those, again, it depends kind of on workload at the time we start. And that also, my general manager, my senior manager would want to final say on that as well.
And I thought you had a very good scope presentation.
Thank you. I'll share that with the team, the team
And all the fees are about the same,
They are.
basically.
Yeah.
It's not a few things.
So if you didn't have any other
And
questions.
everybody's out of Sacramento?
That's a very good question. So actually, Pam, my coworker, is out of Wheatland, which is in Sutter County. It's a little tiny.
Cough is in Berkeley.
Cough is in Berkeley. I work out of Placerville, so out in the foothills. And Josh Jones is in the Vegas area. So we're all over the place. And we have another one in Southern California. So
Tweed?
I'm in Placerville.
I have a question on your the word aggressive on here? It says progressive, proactive, and robust. How aggressive do you get? I mean, what does that mean? And usually you don't use that word, you might say assertive. I just thought that was something.
Yeah, we have, one of the good things about working with public agencies is we get, we kind of know where people are, especially at the upper level, the upper management level. So we do a lot of research, similar agencies, similar issues, see who might be a good candidate. And then the good thing is we can usually reach out to them because their information is listed on the website very often. Although LinkedIn, I have to say, has become a really useful tool as well, quite useful to sort of research candidates.
Okay, questions? Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Richard, Crawford Associates.
Sure, so we've focused exclusively in the public sector. We've been around for about 34 years. And as Doug noted, we are local. We're headquartered in Berkeley, so I took the trek over here after work to make this meeting to express our interest in partnering with you all for the recruitment. First, we founded our firm actually was in HR in wastewater 34 years ago, and that's always kind of been something that we've specialized in. And again, while we do everything in the public sector, really the bulk of our recruitment work lies in water, wastewater. We're currently working with, let's say, 4 water, wastewater agencies or districts local to the Bay Area. So we do quite extensive work in this area. Our network is quite deep, which we really utilize in recruitment such as this. Our team is me, our CEO. We have someone who was working in HR. We did recruitment as well for the city of San Jose for about 20 years. Our overall company is a little over 20 people, and we can add people where needed depending on the demand of the recruitment. So our team size is flexible. And yeah, we're very collaborative in our efforts. We want to make sure that the board has a say over everything that's going on so that you feel the power and the confidence to make a decision when it comes to making a hire. We have very visually friendly tools that we use that takes a lot of the emotional bias out of decision making. Just kind of as data or reference points along the recruiting process. We try to be very innovative in the way that we source. We will use modern tools like LinkedIn and Workable to scour the internet using different social media sites, as well as just good old-fashioned cold calling where needed. Again, we have very extensive lists and networks in this industry. So that's a brief summary of the way that we work. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Who are the agencies you're working for? Can you tell us?
I got them right here.
The 4, there were those 4 in the.
So there's some listed, I think, at the very top that it knows that we're currently in the process.
Well, those are the references.
Yeah, okay.
That might not be the agencies he's working for now. That's what he's.
So right now we're working with West County Wastewater District, headquartered in Hilltop, pretty much in the area. We're actually working with Mr. Jason Dow at CMSA.
Who's that?
And I'm blanking on all of them, but those are the 2 most notable ones that we're working with. We're also working with Mountain View Sanitary District. Mountain View Sanitary District.
Well, that's here. That's on the reference. Isn't it?
No.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well, that's one of them.
they did Union Sand, which,
Yeah.
when we grow up, we want to be Union Sand, right?
Yes, right.
Or are we already past, better? Yeah, we're past that?
Forget that.
Coast side.
Central Contra Costa Sanitary.
Okay. Well, I reviewed all the proposals. What do we want to do? Do we want to interview the top 2, or do we want? Are we ready to make a decision?
I reviewed all of them and I rated them and I did Google review searches on them all. And I actually asked around at the legislative days in Sacramento. So I don't know what else I can do.
Do you have a ranking?
I do.
I don't know.
I think if we all share our rankings, we
I
can
have
get this done.
A, B, and a C.
Okay, who's your A?
And you are A. The one thing that kind of grabs me is when I look at the packet, I know this is, but it's well organized, it's got great visuals, it's got so much, it's got a lot of information, but you can find it. So I appreciate the way you present all this. And you're in person, you know, only 2 showed up, I think we asked 4. And then on the reviews on the computer, they rated 3.5 to 4, 4.5 on the different things I could find. So that's my first choice. My second choice is CPS. It's not as nicely put together, it's not as professional, but they showed up. Same kind of category about the reviews, just a strange word aggressive in here. I don't want anybody, I mean, I'm a little nervous about the word aggressive. Then I put Bob Murray as third. And I don't know why, but I did. And Avery, I went over too, and I put not bad, so I don't know what that means. That's it.
Tom?
Yeah, I believe that Avery and Bob Murray are not Kaufman. I didn't think they were very Kaufman. And I rated Kaufman, and I rated CPS number 2, just like
And your name did come up at the legislative days in Sacramento.
And I've known the firm for years, but I knew, was it Jerome Call?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and that was years ago. And I like the fact that, Sacramento's, I was disappointed in CPS when classes were in Bakersfield, could do this thing in Bakersfield or something. I'd rather not. And you're the cheapest.
Don't say that.
That's travel too. I agree. I rated Coughlin and CPS too, and I didn't, after a glance at the other 2, I didn't think they were
They weren't
players.
nearly as good as.
Yeah. And I like the sanitary district. I mean, this is one thing this district suffered from in its history was hiring somebody who didn't know how to run a sanitary district, right, Steve? And so we want to make sure we hire somebody who is as wonderful as Greg if possible.
Do you talk to key staff people just
Sure, so we can conduct workshops with the staff, town hall meetings with executives or members of the community where we like to have a voice.
I'm most interested in our senior management.
Great. The 3 people sitting in this room.
Yeah, sure.
And also Mary,
Yes,
because
that would be great.
I'm very interested in that.
At the executive level, yeah, that's pretty common, and we're pretty comfortable with hosting conversations with the general staff or executive level staff.
Yeah, that was actually one distinction I made between CPS and COF was that CPS seemed to be playing into, well, they're going to talk to the board about what we want, and I have said a lot of times, we know how to get elected to this seat, we don't know what it takes to run a sanitary district, and the last time we did a search, we relied on a panel of peers, other people running other sanitary districts in Marin. So we did it ourselves, and it worked out, we decided we don't want to do that this time. But I agree, that it is more important for the recruiter to talk to the staff than it is to talk to
Not the whole
us.
staff.
Yeah.
Just the 4 people mentioned.
That's true.
Well,
Well,
I mean, I don't think it would be a problem meeting, I don't know.
I'm sure whoever you end up hiring could talk about
know what to do.
the scope of discussions with staff.
All right, let me address, I think we all hit the same things. I found the exact same things. What I liked best about COF was their reference list of sanitary agencies
Great
by far.
reference list, yeah.
What I liked best about CPS is the 2-year guarantee. So I guess we get free recruiting if the person leaves.
But COP has a 1 year.
Right, everybody had a 1 year. But, so I would
We're
agree.
not going to use that.
I would agree, so I think we have to be, first off.
Do we want to suffer with a bad manager for 2 years?
Right. One thing I'd like to throw in the mix here, when you talk about consolidation, when you talk about sharing services, You know, the Las Colinas Sanitary District only has an interim general manager. They don't have a general manager yet. They may have, you know, Jason left 5 minutes too early. You know, maybe there's some consolidation there. Is there some way we could talk to Koff about interviewing that angle of it? I mean, I don't want to preclude that we look at other avenues. And I'm not opposed to having Koff involved in that. I think it's good money well spent on the whole thing. So I'm not suggesting we don't hire
To
them. We don't ask them.
consolidate with Las Colinas?
I'm not saying we could consolidate. We could share a general manager. Maybe we could, maybe we couldn't. Who knows? I don't know.
Well, that's the whole other game.
Our-
That's premature.
No, I'm saying the reason is they don't currently, they just had their general manager leave. They had an interim, they don't have a full one. Maybe Jason could do something with us, I don't know.
They don't feed into this, I guess they don't feed into the same sewage treatment plant.
Right.
We have no background in working with them, and they have been through what we were going through when we got Greg. So I feel like they would need to, in terms of staff morale and such, they would need to clean up their house.
Hey, Greg, is it a full-time job?
Being a general manager?
Even of Las
Pretty sure
Colinas.
You have another district that has about a $50 million project?
I'm sorry, let me ask you this, Craig. If you were staying on, could you manage Las Colinas as well?
I honestly, no. I mean, not
We do recycling.
not today. We have our, this district has a very, I would say, a relatively high degree of activity. I mean, we are moving on a lot of fronts in a lot of areas. The amount of business that comes our way, the amount of business that this board processes and considers every month is really substantial. Jason's not here, but you know, the intergovernmental activities that already exist with this position, if we're functioning in the way we like to, which is outward looking and you know, cooperative and partnership wise, you've got a pretty full plate within our JPA group and our local government. So in all seriousness, the short answer is yes. I mean, what you have to really keep the wheels moving here at you know, with the level of initiative and activity of the district is it's a full plate. I've been doing it, as you guys know, for 5 years, and I mean, certainly huge aspects of it have gotten incredibly better because of all of the, you know, obviously all of the great improvements and everything. But even with that, it's sort of the better we get, the more we bring to the table because we're able to, right? You free up capacity.
It doesn't get less.
Yeah, no, it's a very,
Right. And we get better and we become more leaders in the, you know, in technology and in the, whatever.
All right, so are we giving we have a motion?
By the way, you got to talk to Greg too, right?
Absolutely.
We purposefully accelerated this process as much as possible, including having a special meeting to begin discussing recruiting firms, because we want him to be a part of choosing our, and he's not going anywhere. He's still going to live in Mill Valley, and he's going to work in San Francisco.
And we're gonna merge with Mill Valley and raise his rates.
All right, I move we accept the bid of Koff.
Oh, we're moving ahead?
Associates, yes,
If everybody agrees there first, what do we need to?
and engage them.
I mean, I feel strong about it, but we're not gonna have, okay,
I second the motion.
don't mess.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't think it was gonna happen this way.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion
Motion carries.
Thank
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, all right, now, so that ends that. I wanted to go over the verbal report by board members. And I'm sorry, at the beginning of this, you wanted to talk, so we can put that at the beginning, but I'm just saying, the rule is that we have 3 things: finance, Central Marin Sanitation, North Bay Watershed, and human resources, and public relations when they meet.
All right, so this
We
is,
can put this on.
That's fine.
okay, so this is the first time I've done this legislative days. It's awesome. Everybody should go at least once. So you go up, yesterday I spent all day, in a party in the evening. But they hook you up with your, with Mark Levine and McGuire. You talk to their staffers. They have 3 bills right now they're looking at. This is CSDA. So you're also there's about 200 special districts, so it's everybody. Fire department, cemetery, recreational, but it is the most interesting group of people because they're so varied and have all these stories and weird JPAs. I mean, we think, they have,
Again, is our
I felt like, oh my God, where am I? And so, anyway, I want to go. So anyway, that's what you do the first day. There is some people that come and present, and then you go over these bills. Mark McGuire has a bill right now. There's 2,000 special districts in the state of California. Only 1,000 of them have websites.
Really?
So he's presenting a bill that says you have to have a website, and there's specific things you have to put on there. So that's one of the.
Is there anything that you mentioned that we don't have?
No, we're good, but when I first started here,
One thing
it was really messed up.
Since you brought, one thing I'd like to reiterate, I'd like our website to have a link to the YouTubes of the meetings. So they're on YouTube, but you should be able to go to our website and say, I want to look at the meeting of March 22nd, April 3rd, you know, there should be a link on our website for that, make it nice and easy. Go ahead.
Do you know which one we're looking at? Because the three districts of Sanford, Village, and Davis District has their own website.
Yeah, then they'll merge.
And it's 48 homes.
Well, anyway, so
But anyway,
there's going to be some extra money to help these certain districts who don't have any money. Because I mean, when you think about it, they could be very tiny. So that's one of the bills that they kind of pushed.
so if we consolidate, we can save that money.
Yeah. Then they had this, this other bill about redevelopment money that is going to probably come back, and they're thinking Gavin's going to win. And so I know redevelopment money is sort of a thorn in their side because there's still millions of dollars that's still owed when it stopped.
What, do you mean the redevelopment?
Yeah, when it stopped, 2012 is what they said.
And you said that
There's
bonds?
still money out there that is still owed from that. Don't ask.
Do you have debt?
Yes, yes. So anyway, that's one of the bills, that's one of the bills. And then there was a bill on surplus land. And they're saying affordable housing is coming in like monsters. And so they're trying to take off leases for surplus land, which doesn't affect us. Because then the developers, they'll have more land to develop, right? That's one of the key points. So we're opposing that bill. Okay, so then what did I do today? What did I do today?
Are those
Oh.
all McGuire's bills?
No, these are, one of them is Chu, David Chu, and one of them is Ting from San Francisco. The San Francisco one is about the affordable housing. Because they're really into that, you know, what's his name, Wiener and all of them. So then I had today this woman, the CEO of CalPERS spoke. And it was fascinating, and she's this little tiny woman, and she's just been there about 2 years. So this is where we're at right now. We're at 71% funded, and she's working on getting to 80. So Tom, I really got to appreciate this, and I was thinking about, you know, you and your finance background and everything, because she really explained it as simply as possible. And so they're not even replacing some of their staff. They're doing well. So they went from 68 to 71, I think, in 2 years. And that's probably the highlights, except I really like this because it talks about districts, and it says special districts are formed by communities when it's something that the community wants, what the community wants done well, and what is done with local control. Local control. Done. That's it. It was a great 2 days. You kept saying, you should go, and I was like, yeah. But it was really a good 2 days.
I've been once, it was a couple of years ago. I found it pretty good.
I mean, it's just people from all over the state. Really, you just, every walk, cowboys.
Karen?
I have nothing.
Tom? No. All right, I have a couple of things, sorry to keep us late, but I do want to mention, I was in front of the San Antonio Town Council. I report to the Town Council as as the mirror rep, unlike the Ross guy who never shows up. No, okay. So anyway, we talked about the lateral ramps and not being out of money and how to change, how people can reapply because Kate Wallen was concerned about that. I spoke to Tonya Rhodes of Kentfield today. Tonya is the one who had some complaints with the work being done on her property, and we talked about the road paving. She sent me some pictures of a little bit of a brown spot on the lawn. For the most part, the work was done fine. There's a little brown spot on her lawn, she'd like to see something done about that, and there's some flower things, but the bottom line is, no, she hasn't been spoken to about the road, so nobody's contacted her, so I'd like to make sure we follow up on that, and we contact her, or we have somebody contact her about the road that we talked about would be repaved, because she wants some of her own driveway repaved, so she thought maybe we should call that contractor and tie in, so we need to organize that with her, please, and just not leave her hanging out there. And then I spoke today to Jessica Herbold. This is the woman in Fairfax who lives right next door to the emergency repair over the Town and Country. That is being worked on. There was they had to tear down a tree, they cut down a large tree, and when you do that, you're supposed to return it to some sort of semblance, and that means to plant some new trees. That, I spoke to Greg about, that is moving forward. She has spoken to people, so I feel that's in good hands, so I'm leaving that alone. I did attend on May 9th the Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors Association. I reached out to Paul Longaro, and this is a little bit of an issue. So there are some members of the plumbing people around who don't do business with the Ross Valley Sanitary District because they think it's challenging. So when I heard that, I reached out and I asked if I could meet them and have a round table and learn some things. So I sent a very detailed letter to Greg about their concerns. Greg was very clear with me that some of the biggest problems we have is with contractors replacing laterals and doing it in a sloppy manner and pushing stuff down the lateral. You know, they got all parts that it's like, oh, just throw it down here, let them pump it and clean it and drain it, and that's completely, so I said to him that at some point I'll be going back to that plumbing heating contractors meeting, they have them once a month, and we'll discuss it further, but they were delighted to hear that we removed our recommended list, and anybody, I said, you know, I used the line from Godfather 3, you know, you may have gotten out, but we're bringing you back in. You're all authorized effective immediately.
Another benefit is eliminating those three.
They were delighted. That got cheers. That got applause when I said that one.
Yeah.
So they're pleased about that. There are some, their main concern was that there is a large, big, fat, thick book of California state regulations on plumbing. And then there's a large, big, fat, thick book on the Ross Valley Sanitary District, and they're not the same. And they're like, no, look, we train people on this. We don't train people on this. The changes that affect them are not that significant. If I recall, there were some couplings that are authorized by the California, the state of California, that not authorized, and it's in our addendum. And I think I specifically told you the page 14 of addendum B of our documents. And the ones that we require are significantly more expensive, and sometimes there's a lot of them. So it drives up the price for them and our ratepayers. I've simply asked the question of Greg to pass on to staff, why are we doing this? Is there a reason for this? And that. So Greg, I feel very good about that.
And if there's a reason, keep doing it.
You're right. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. No pressure. Okay, and so I wanted to, I just wanted to let you know I reached out to them, I went to that meeting, and I'm going to continue that conversation with them. I'd rather have more people doing business with their customers than less. The other thing I did, as I mentioned briefly at the beginning, is I did send a letter to Dawn Proctor of the County Marin tax assessors. Let me be very clear about my feeling about this. The city of Larkspur, and it's in my documents, I'm not going to pull it. I know it's 906 that we're proposing for fiscal year 18-19 for the Ross Valley Sanitary District rate, 909. I think it's 1158, but I'm not going to pull it out for Larkspur. Everybody pays ad valorem, but Larkspur. I have a suspicion that the ad valorem for San Anselmo and Ross and Kentfield and Kent Woodlands and Sleepy Hollow and Fairfax is a lot more than a couple $100. And if that's the case, at our next 5-year plan, we need to readjust Larkspur.
Why?
Because if they're paying $400
Yeah, but they voted
less.
for that. They voted for that as part of that
No.
annexation.
I'm saying they're paying now, they're paying hundreds less. Less, because we don't get the ad valorem. The assumption was the ad valorem was a couple $100. I'm saying, I think the ad valorem is more like 700, 900.
Maybe when they first did
Right,
that.
so we're gonna get,
So it's-
I've asked, let me read this, thank you for speaking with me today, let me recap my questions, concerns. The Ross Valley Sanitary District collects payments from the ratepayers in two ways. First, there are the sanitary fees that we charge and bill to the customer. This is paid by all of our ratepayers. The other additional fee is that we get a percentage of ad valorem taxes for some, but not all of our ratepayers underline. This is sadly a historical anomaly. We need to fix it sometime soon.
We're on a rampage on these historical
Yeah. All of our ratepayers in the following areas, and I showed her, San Anselmo, Fairfax, Ross, Kentfield, Sleepy Hollow, Murray Hill, Green Branch, Grant Woodlands pay the ad valorem, Larkspur doesn't. And what I'm saying is, what I said to her is, I'm asking her to give us a ballpark estimate of what single-family homes pay in those individual districts, what multiple family homes pay in those individual districts, each of them, and what commercial districts pay. And when we find out the ad valorem in San Anselmo is $1,200 a year, cha-ching, Larkspur.
Well,
And suddenly Larkspur.
They got their seat then for a reason.
I wanted to bring this to your attention in a public meeting, because I think it's very important that Larkspur
There
is
are
aware.
considerations.
Better
For
get a security
example,
system, that's all.
everybody pays the same property tax
Yeah.
overall. What you're talking about is how it's allocated.
We don't get anything from Larkspur.
We don't get anything in that area, but they pay the exact same property tax if it's a home assessed at $1 million in Larkspur or $1 million in Fairfax. They both pay 1% plus maybe some bonus.
Yeah.
And where it goes was based on, I think it was called Senate Bill 1, passed in 1978 or 9. And it just picked out a way to do it, and it averaged the previous 3 years. So they are paying more, they are paying the same property tax, it's just where it's going to.
Right.
It turns out that our property tax in our area is going, the property tax in Larkspur is basically going more to schools than it is in the Ross Valley Sanitary District. So I don't think it should be cut and dry, a one-to-one, hey, their property tax, we get, whatever we get, $400 a home or $500 or something like that. We're going to add $500 onto Larkspur.
Well, we can talk about that in the new
We're gonna
rate,
talk
but I'm
about
saying I want to know the facts.
Fine.
I want to know the facts.
Yeah. But it's not cut and dry.
Yeah, that's fine.
So are you talking to them as a citizen? Or are you talking to them as a board member? I don't
just
want to
saying-
piss them off.
No,
to be
I'm not
honest.
gonna.
No, they
All right.
That's good.
All right, are we adjourned?
Thank you. I'm sorry, the meeting's adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.